What's good? What's good? What's good, fam? Today is finally June 25th, and by the time you actually see this video, it's probably going to be June 26th, unfortunately, because I completely underestimated how long it takes to edit 9 hours of content. But nonetheless, welcome to episode 21 of season 1 of the Fictional Basketball League, or FBL for short. And before I begin, I want to give a big shout out to you for clicking on this vid first and foremost. Big shout out to my OG subscribers, as well as the 2 new subscribers that we got from episode 20. Now, naturally, the first thing that should come to mind when you see the screen is, how do we get here? The playoff bracket is looking pretty wild with 4 upset victories and 2 series that ended up in 2 competitive teams getting swept away, but this is what we are here to review, discuss, and enjoy from a viewing perspective. Now, I can't hold you. I really thought about breaking this episode up into 2 parts because of the fact that at a minimum, there are 32 games to cover if each series was a 4-0 sweep, but as you can tell, there are way more games than that. So if you're rocking with me and this series, then you won't mind going through it all with your boy. Now, before we can do that, we got to talk about the Season 1 awards. Now, starting off with our league MVP, we have Theo Payne from the New York Knicks, who pretty much did his thing both on the court as well as a simulation perspective. He ended up the season with 26 points, 16 boards, 3 assists, a steal, and 2 blocks, averaging 57, 82, and 32. And like I said, he's been a beast on the court, whether you're watching the game in-game or if you're just looking at the stats from a sim perspective. I will say that there were a number of people on the list that were outshining Theo towards the All-Star break, but we'll get into that very shortly. Nonetheless, I think this is a well-deserved reward for Theo for his hard work, and I'm looking to see how Theo develops over the next couple of seasons. Now, next we have Kenji Hall winning the Rookie of the Year, and I will say it was a tough battle for this spot between Kenji, Omar Abdul-Rauf on the Bucks, as well as Bayou James on the Cleveland Cavaliers. But considering how well the Warriors did in the second half of the season behind Kenji's leadership, I can't really say that I'm surprised. And as you can see, Kenji averaged 23 points, 12 boards, 7 assists, a steal, a block, and shooting 45, 76, and 42. So when you look at his stats as well as the outcome for his team, Kenji truly deserved this award. So big shout out to Hoodie Sean, because Kenji is one of his characters in the 2K verse, as I'll call it. The link to Hoodie Sean's channel is in the description below, as well as that for YG the Beast, so check them out. Now, 6th Man of the Year goes to Harvey Ray, who leads the second string of the Rockets, not only from a position standpoint as the 1 guard, but also from a stat perspective. So it is, in my opinion, that Harvey is a solid 2-way player, averaging 13 points, 10 boards, 6 assists, a steal, and a block. However, these stats don't highlight the things that get done on the court that you don't necessarily see from a stat line perspective. So as a fun fact, Harvey was the second in voting for the DPOY award. So this should be enough proof that he can clamp the best of them and he can contribute offensively. I think this is a well-deserved accomplishment for Harvey. Now, the DPOY award went to Aaron Lawrence from the Hawks, and I can say that both from a sim perspective and watching gameplay, just as I said with Theo, Aaron is an absolute pest on defense. He's also a threat offensively, almost shooting 50% from the field, but his 3-ball is kind of trash, I can't hold you. But despite his struggle shooting from beyond the arc, Aaron averaged 22 points, 9 boards, 6 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. And then the final award goes to Harvey Ray as the most improved player. Now, as I explained in the creation vid for the FBL, since we're playing off of a fresh slate, none of these players have any actual stats. 2K will try to assign any old random person this award, so I made the rule that whoever got the 6th Man of the Year would also get the most improved player, just so that we have a list or a name on the list as we move on to the next couple of seasons. Now, moving on to the All-FBL first team, we have Kenji Hall again being selected for the first team, as well as my boy Miles. He was also selected, which I'm very proud of, especially since I simulated a lot of games during the season. He's in fact only one out of the 3 brothers that got selected for one of the All-FBL teams. Then we also have Darren Harper from the Magic, we have Logan Wolf from the Raptors, and then Theo Payne rounding it up for the Knicks. And the second team is made up of Michael Terry from the Celtics, Deion King from the Lakers, which is rather surprising to me. I figured Raphael would be up there, but considering the All-Star snub, I digress. But then we have Justice Blue from the Jazz. We also have Quinn Forbes from the Detroit Pistons, which I kind of disagree with. I think Eli Harris should have been here rather than Quinn, given Eli's impact. But plus the fact that Eli was injured, I guess this makes sense. But Eli came back, and he was a dominant force at the 3, plus the fact that he got to the playoffs where Quinn's team was at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. But it is what it is. And then we have Spencer Wang from the Spurs rounding up the second team. And on the third team, we have Damon Weber from the Trailblazers, which was absolutely shocking to me considering how trash the Trailblazers were this season. Similarly for Hendricks, who's this year's scoring champ, I think he should have been on the second team, to keep it a buck with you. And if Dion truly deserved it, he'd take Damon's spot on the third team. You could just look at the stats and let me know if I'm bugging or not. But outside of that, we have Eli Harris, who made the third team, although I believe he should have been on the second team. O'Shea Ryder, he's a bit debatable looking at his stats, but I'll leave that there. And then Shea Honeycutt, who was 5th in the MVP voting, is here on the third team. So it's surprising that he fell down all the way to the third team. I truly think he should have been more along the lines of the second team at the very minimum, and not the third team, but that's my opinion. Now for the all defensive first team, 2 of the 5 names should be familiar by now. First, we have Harvey Ray from the Rockets, shout out to him. Aaron Lawrence from the Hawks, but we also have Ricky Boss from the Timberwolves. Then we have OJ Holmes from the Wizards, which I slightly disagree with, but I didn't highlight enough games for y'all to be able to back me on this, so we'll just have to deal with this. And then we have Logan Wolf from the Raptors. Now for the all defensive second team, we have Damian Sims from the Rockets. We have the rookie Harry Reynolds from the Thunder. And then we have another rookie, one of my untouchables on the Mavs, Steve Levins. And then we have the OG Kenny Fuller from the Nets. Kenny and Steve had some battles on the blacktop last summer when I was building out this league. It was great to watch and great to see them perform well enough for an FBL nod. And then we have Julian Bush from the Hawks rounding up the second team. Now for the all rookie first team, I'll admit that I was shocked, mainly because of the 5th name on the list. Now at the All-Star break, Kenji was the first in running for Rookie of the Year, which makes sense as to why he's here. And then we have Bayou James, who was 3rd on the list, so shout out to YG the Beast again. As I mentioned before, YG's channel can be found in the description below. And then we have Omar Abdul Rauf, who was 2nd on the list for Rookie of the Year, and then Skylar Cash from the Bulls, who was 4th. However, the 5th name on the list was Raymond Castillo from the Wizards, but instead, Harvey Reynolds from OKC crept in to take Raymond's spot, which is a bit wild for me because you can see right now we have 4 guards on this all rookie first team, considering that Raymond was top 5 during the season. So I don't think it was tied to his injuries. Something else must have happened, but nonetheless, Harry Reynolds is here on the first team. But at the very least, Raymond got some respect by making the all-rookie second team. Now, he only played 60 games compared to Harry Reynolds after I looked back at the stats. Harry Reynolds played 72 games, so that may play a factor into it. Plus, there may be some things with the stat line that I didn't even bother to look at. But nonetheless, at least Raymond got some shine. Some other notables are yet again Steve Levins from the Mavs, Lamont Johnson, who surprised me. He made a big jump from playing garbage minutes to making the all-rookie second team, so kudos to him. I will say that Lamont started off the season as a 68 overall and jumped up 4 overall, so it's clear he's putting in that work to get the respect that he got, so shout out to him. Then we also have Bill Patterson from the Hornets. He made the list, as well as Rudolph Harrell from the Hawks. So I'm very pleased with the people that made the team. Now, should there be some things that get restructured? I believe so, but nonetheless, congratulations to all of the award winners. Now, I want to level set with you before we get into these games. So there's going to be a mixture of box score analysis, there's going to be a mixture of gameplay, and there's going to be a mixture of simulation. So I just want you to be forewarned before we dive into it, because there's not going to be gameplay for all of these games. So now with that being said, the first thing that we're going to talk about now that we covered the awards, it's time to get into business and talk about the first bracket out west and the third upset in the playoffs, which is the Pelicans versus the Warriors. I can't hold you. I thought the Pelicans were going to get smoked during the series, not because of what happened in real life, but because the Warriors have been a problem throughout the season. Add the fact that the Pelicans struggled against them during the regular season and the fact that the Pelicans secondary is a bit sweet defensively. I thought we were going to struggle. At the very least, I was going to hope that this would go 7 games, and if we lost, it'd be the last game. I also wanted to note the fact that with KC Starks out, I expected to have a problem, generally speaking, let alone the fact that Kenji Hall and J.R. Griffin individually are in the starting 5 and they could get buckets with ease. So to address this, I made some modifications to our defensive matchups where I have Lior Bay starting and guarding J.R. Griffin, while I had Miles trying his best to guard Kenji Hall. So with that being said, let's get into game 1. Man, when I say we snuck away with game 1, beating the Warriors 118 to 107, that would be a huge understatement. But big shout out to Miles, who had a ridiculous 41 points. But before we get into Miles and his accolades for the games, let's talk about the Warriors and specifically their box score. Now, at first glance, it seemed as if our defensive scheme worked because we kept Kenji to well below his average in scoring. So remember, during the regular seasons, Kenji, from the award segment, averaged around 23 points, but we had him under that, but more importantly, under his 45% in shooting. During the regular season, JR averaged 14 points, 3 rebounds, 9 assists, and 2 steals on 50, 40, and 79 shooting. So JR kind of turned up a bit, but with Danny Edwards struggling to get things going from beyond the arc, Max Henderson not turning things up a notch, and the lack of production from the bench, it's no wonder why the Warriors lost this game. Now, on the other hand, Miles was putting in work, shooting 56% from the field with 41 points, 7 boards, 5 assists, and he even got 2 blocks. Don't worry about those turnovers though. Axe had one of his worst games this season with only 10 points, shooting for 33%, and then Zach Ellis Jr. and Henry Fisher both surprised me with their 19 and 13 points respectively, but both were fairly efficient, which I like. And then Stephen Lee, he did what he needed to do with his double-double, but what helped seal the deal was the fact that we got to the line way more than the Warriors did, with us scoring 18 to the Warriors 10 at the line, which explains the point differential. So with that being said, on to game 2. So by the end of the first quarter, the Pelicans were down by 15, which is a stark difference compared to game 1, where the Pelicans were up by 1 after several lead changes. Now, 1 point isn't that big of a deal, but at least they had the lead. Now, come the second quarter, the game was a bit closer with multiple lead changes as in the first, but by the half, the Pelicans were down by 22 points, and the team didn't fare any better in the third, only scoring 13 points. So although the team was able to finally outscore the Warriors in the fourth, it was a little too late, and so the Warriors ended up winning game 2 by 28 points. Ugh. Now, as you can see here, there's a big difference from the Warriors in this game, specifically from Kenji Hall. And I will say that Kenji was hooping with the 26-point triple-double. Kenji had 13 boards, 10 assists, a steal, and 2 blocks, all while shooting 63% from the field, which is amazing. And despite running a 9-man rotation, a lot of the Warriors were able to score in the double digits. So in addition to that, 2 other players had double-doubles. Isaiah Marsh, he had 18 points, 13 boards, shooting 50% from the field. J.R. Griffin had 16 points and 18 assists on 43% shooting. And some other notables were the numbers coming from Derek Houston and Max Henderson, who I said in the last game, they didn't really perform very well. But Max, he pretty much had 18 points and on near perfect shooting, and Derek Houston got busy with 20 points, 5 boards, 2 assists on 64% shooting. So this switch in gameplay between the Warriors kind of shows what I was expecting in game 1, which is why I can't hold you. I was fearful of the Pelicans going up against the Warriors, especially from a sim perspective. Now, looking at the Pelicans box score, you could see also what is different from the Pelicans between game 1 and game 2. So first and foremost, Zach Ellis Jr. led the team in scoring with 28 points, 2 boards, 6 assists, 1 steal, and 4 blocks. Now, I know I've said that I wanted more production from Zach over the course of the season, but I didn't mean at the expense of the starting 5 contributing. So if you take a look at Miles, he tried his best with 24 points, 4 boards, and 9 assists on 44% shooting, but X got clamped up again with only 18 points on 33% shooting. And we also had no production from any of the quote-unquote defensive team players in Dario Floyd as well as Lior Bay, who both had 0% in shooting, which is why we pretty much got served in this game. So now, on to game 3. And do note, I'm adding these transitions just in case you need to take a break. So now that you've grabbed your snack, maybe a drink, or maybe used the restroom, the The Pelicans were back home, and it was important for the Pelicans to win this game. Now, the first quarter was very similar to how things went in game 1 and 2 with a lot of lead changes and a tight game. But at the end of the first, the Pelicans only had a 3-point lead, and by the end of the second, the Warriors were able to flip the script and take a 3-point lead for their benefit. Now, by the end of the third, the Pelicans managed to stay in the game with only a 4-point deficit, but at around the 5-minute mark in the fourth quarter, the Pelicans were down by 8, so I had to hop in and try to close out this game. Now, Miles' perimeter defense and lateral quickness isn't the greatest, I can't hold you, but hopping in, he had to guard J.R. Griffin off the rip. Now, during this play, Stephen Lee helped out big time with the pick and roll, but Miles was wilding and left J.R. Griffin wide open in the corner. Fortunately, J.R. missed, which created an opportunity for Miles, who was leaking for a quick 2 points at the opposite end. Now, the coach immediately called a timeout because he didn't like what he saw and he wanted to bring Kenji back into the game. But with Kenji back in the game, the Warriors then committed fouls on 2 subsequent possessions, which helped bring the score to 115 to 113. Now, soon after that, Kenji showed exactly why he is a problem. This man had Miles skating all over the court and then finished with a layup over Stephen Lee. I mean, did you see that? If not, I suggest you run that back. But after Bruce scored here, I noticed that Zach wasn't doing what I needed him to do in the paint, so I ended up swapping out Zach for Henry Fisher with the hope of him stopping easy access to the rim. And even with this change, we still have to worry about the perimeter. And I must say that Kenji is fast AF with a mean quick first step. He ended up losing Miles around the pick for a mean green from 3, and I can't hold you. This was one of the coldest highlights this season, and why this is the thumbnail for the episode. With the score 123 to 122, it was important to get a stop, and as you can see, Miles got caught up against the pick again, but fortunately, Stephen Lee was able to get this nice stop. Miles passed the rock to Stephen, who passed it to Henry Fisher with a hey! Nice dunk in the paint by Henry Fisher. I forgot he had ups like that. This was fun to see. Score is now 123 to 124. Now, the fast break in the last 5 minutes was the game changer for the Pelicans, but right here, the 2K gods blessed Miles with an inadvertent putback, and Derek Houston pretty much sold, bringing the score to 123 to 126. And I will admit that Stephen Lee was the Pelicans' saving grace, getting several key stops. The first was right here against Kenji, which resulted in 2 points on the opposite end from Axe with a safe 2-hand dunk. Now, we definitely need Axe to play like this consistently if the Pelicans are going to have a chance against the Rockets and if they make it to the conference finals. Now, getting back to Stephen Lee, Stephen was so dialed in that it got 2 stops in succession against Bruce Sally. The first here where he sent that ball damn near out the arena, and the second where he had Bruce shook. Now, Miles wanted to put the Warriors on notice that they weren't going down without a fight, driving to the basket for another 2 points to increase their cushion. And at the end of it all, the Pelicans take Game 3 to lead the series 2-1, beating the Warriors 130 to 123. Now, Miles ended up with a monster 54-point game with 3 boards and 8 assists, shooting for 68% from the field. And Axe showed up and showed out with 26 points, 12 boards, and 4 assists. But I will say that both he and Miles were wilding with a combined 9 turnovers. Sheesh. But then Zach Ellis, he had back-to-back double-digit scoring games, which I appreciate. Dario Floyd finally decided to check in, as well as Henry Fisher. And Stephen Lee, although he didn't score as much as I would like, he was a defensive pest in the last 5 minutes of the game, which I definitely believed helped us close out this game. And Kenji Hall almost had a back-to-back triple-double game with 29 points, 11 boards, 9 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. J.R. Griffin was still playing on par with his regular season stats, giving his 14-point and 11 assist double-double, but at any given moment, he could really turn up. So we definitely had our guard up, our defenses up against the duo between Kenji and J.R. Griffin. But I will say that the Warriors have more depth than the Pelicans, which is why this series was a bit stressful for me, but this was a great win, and I definitely hope that the Pelicans at this point didn't rest on their laurels. Now, after Game 3, KC Starks was cleared to play after recovering from his injury, and I can't hold you, I wasn't a fan of having KC back in the rotation considering how bad the Pelicans were playing when he was there. In fact, the Pelicans' end of the season run was after KC got injured, so check out episodes 19 and 20 if you need a refresher or if you haven't seen it just yet. But rather than putting him in the starting lineup to replace Henry Fisher, who is now starting, I had KC run with the second string to provide another layer of defense that was missing. Now, the strategy seemed to work because by the end of the second quarter, This was the very first time that the Pelicans were leading at the start of the half compared to the first 3 games. And at the end of the third, the Pelicans had a 10-point cushion that I was hoping they would hold on to, because as we know, this team tends to struggle with closing out the fourth. When it was all said and done, the Pelicans actually took game 4 with a 9-point win over the Warriors, led by Axe. And as I said before, we need this type of energy from Axe all the time. On top of the 27 points, Axe had 7 boards, 1 assist, 2 steals, shooting for 59%. Miles had a mid-game by his standards with 21 points, 6 boards, 6 assists, and 2 steals, shooting 48%. But Steven is who really made me happy by getting more involved in the offense with a 12-point and 17-board double-double. He even got some assists in. And then Zach was now on his 3rd game with double-digit scoring, who is low-key our unsung hero here. And then Drew Gill, he finally contributed more than he normally does, but then Henry Fisher decided to check out again after the last game, which kind of irks me, and I'm wondering how we could develop him more. So I'm really on the fence as far as whether or not we're going to bring him back in the offseason, but that's still TBD. Now for the Warriors, you'll see the box score is totally different from the previous games. Derek Houston decided to turn up this game with 17 points on 54% shooting. Kenji had an off night, but he still had a 13-point and 14-board double-double. But Danny Edwards, J.R. Griffin, and Max Henderson absolutely got clamped up. Maybe Casey's presence was actually noteworthy, but the jury is still out on that. But you'll see that the team is still running a 9-man rotation, but it seems like they're still trying to figure out how to work with Casey in the second string, because you see, I think his name is Robert York. He was shooting 2 for 10, and then Tony Popovich had 1 for 7, which is pretty terrible by their standards. And fam, I can't hold you. Game 5 was absolutely horrendous. The Warriors started the quarter off with a 25-8 run, and by the end of the quarter, the Pelicans were down by 14. The second string tried their best to reduce the deficit in the second quarter, but only brought the deficit down to 10 points. And by the fourth, the Warriors went on another wild run to win Game 5 120-105. Now, Kenji finished the game with another triple-double with 26 points, 16 boards, 10 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks with 45% shooting, on top of getting to the line a whole bunch. This game, Danny Edwards really turned it up with 21 points, 3 boards, 6 assists, 2 steals, and a block. On top of that, with 57% shooting and 67% shooting from the 3. And then J.R. Griffin is consistent AF with 19 points, 5 boards, 8 assists, 1 steal, and 1 block on 69% shooting. Bruce Sally had one of his biggest games, scoring his highest in the playoffs with 19 points and 64% shooting. And then finally, Derek Houston finished his 5th game in a row with over 12 points on 55% shooting. Sheesh. And my goodness, Axe showed up again with 25 points, 6 boards, 3 assists on 68% shooting. Miles had 22 points, 3 boards, 7 assists, and 3 steals on 36% shooting. Probably one of his worst games from an efficiency perspective all season. Goodness. And then Henry Fisher finally decided to check into the game, or the series, I should say, since what game was that? Game 2, I think? But he had 14 points, as well as Dario Floyd, who had 13 points. Shout out to him. He finally decided to turn up. But unfortunately, Casey Starks and Stephen Lee disappeared this game, and so much so that I had to check to see if they were injured. But nope, they just decided to take this game off. So now it was on to Game 6. Now, for this game, I knew off rip that I would have to pay attention and make a determination on when I would hop into the game. I figured like before, I would sim through the fourth quarter and make an assessment as to whether or not I truly need to step in. And at the end of the first quarter, the Pelicans had a 2-point lead. It wasn't large, but somewhat safe. That quickly dropped down to 1 point by the end of the half, and by the end of the third, the Pelicans were back up by 2 points. But in the fourth, the Pelicans maintained their lead up until the 5-minute mark, where there were like 2 lead changes. So I decided to hop in at this point to see what was going on and if we could close out this game and move on with our playoff run. Now, this game was a physical one, with the Pelicans committing 24 team fouls to the Warriors 19. And I knew we needed to be aggressive, but also smart, which is why Miles pulled back and Steven found an opening in the paint. Now, fast forward a little bit, and Kenji here during this play made a huge error and got his 5th personal foul, which made it difficult for him to be as aggressive as he normally would be on defense. But not too long after, Axe made the same mistake with both teams now with 6 overall fouls. Now Danny Edwards was only able to make one of his shots, bringing the deficit to within 4, fortunately for us. But fast forward, and Miles was able to get by Kenji during this play, not because Kenji can't guard him, but because Kenji was in foul trouble, as I said before. So fortunately, Miles was able to make that tough layup to bring the lead to within 6. But fast forward, Stephen Lee does what Stephen Lee does, and Miles passes it to reward the big, and hey, that boy got 2 bodies. Sorry, Kenji. Sorry, Max. You had to get that in the paint. Pause. Yeah, Kenji was not a fan of that, and in true Kenji form, he took it personally and made Miles pay with a quick layup in the paint. I told you, man, Kenji has a mean quick first step, and he blew by Miles. Nice with the jelly, 2 points in the paint. The score is now 99-107 with less than 40 seconds left, and Miles bears it home to get another 2 points in the paint. But the Warriors still got some fight in them. Danny Edwards takes an erratic shot and misses, but then Bruce Sally gets the putback to bring the score to within 8 points. So the score is 101-109, and Axe and Henry are both savages with the alley-oop. Oh my goodness, I wish Henry would do this more consistently, but that was nice. That was a nice little highlight right there. And so with under 7 seconds left, the Warriors still take a shot to try to get something on the board, but the Pelicans have survived the 1-seeded Warriors to go to the semi-conference finals. Oh man, this is a great win, especially since we won it at home. Didn't expect it to happen, but we actually got through the first round. So looking at the box score, Axe had a monster game yet again. He is the MVP for the series with 32 points, 7 boards, 5 assists, shooting 12 for 19. Stephen Lee with a big 70% shooting, 20 point, 13 rebound double-double. Henry Fisher had 15 points, 3 boards, 2 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. His efficiency was trash, but he contributed more than he has in the past. And Miles, he got clamped up with only 14 points, 4 rebounds, but he got 9 assists, a steal, a block, shooting a little under 50%. And then Casey Starks, he did his thing. I wish we could get more out of him, but he was able to get to the line. Zach fell off this game with only 7 points. Igor, we never really talk about Igor, but he actually got 6 points. And Drew, we never talk about Drew as well. He had 5. But then Leo Arbe and Dario Floyd, they also bust and didn't really do much, shooting 25% from the field respectively on 2 points apiece. But then if we look at the Warriors box score, Kenji had another double-double, but on really poor efficiency, and sheesh, it was actually almost a triple-double if he was able to get 2 more assists. But Danny Edwards, he had a really trash game as well, shooting 30% from the field, but he was able to get to the line a lot. But Derek Houston, man, he did his thing again with 16 points on 80% shooting. So this was 6 straight games where he had over 12 points, which is beyond the norm from what he had for the regular season. I would say Bruce Sally, he tried to contribute with his 13 points, 6 rebounds, but his efficiency was poor as well. And then J.R. Griffin disappeared entirely from the game, only taking 9 shots and scoring 11 points, which is definitely not like him considering what we saw over the past games, let alone the entire season. But I would say the leading factor in the Warriors losing this game is the fact that they lived by the 3 and they died by the 3. So specifically speaking, the Warriors shot 30% from beyond the arc compared to the Pelicans, who shot 52% from beyond the arc, resulting in 5 more made 3s in this game compared to the Warriors. Now, for the series, the Warriors did shoot 148 3-pointers compared to the Pelicans, who shot 106. But when we're talking efficiency standpoint, the Warriors had 39% roughly made shots compared to the Pelicans, who had 40%. So you could take it as you want. I think between that and just poor defense in some instances, that may be why that the Golden State Warriors lost. Just looking at the stat line, I don't think we're going to get a true picture of it since we didn't watch the games like the 2 games that I showed. But ultimately, this was a great win, but the work has just started because we have to face the super team in the next round. And in fact, the next series that I'm going to highlight is the 5th-seeded Timberwolves against the 4th-seeded Rockets. So if you made it this far in the video, let me know down in the comments what you think about this format right now, because as I mentioned before, I'm trying to figure out how I want to show the rest of these series. So let me know how you're liking this so far. But I would say for game 1 of the Timberwolves versus the Rockets literally mopped the floor with the Timberwolves with a score of 103-82. Now, this is by far the lowest scoring in the season thus far, especially in the playoffs, considering like most teams are scoring around 120 points. So I would say that this was definitely more of a defensive game than anything on both sides of the house. But let's get into the scores, since I could ramble on for a long time about this. Now, Eli Primetime Harris started the series off with 24 points, 19 boards, 5 assists on 56% shooting. Damian Sims had 16 points and 7 assists, shooting for 67% and 100% from the line. And in fact, the team was almost flawless from the free throw line just in general. And then we have Wallace Vidal, who went off with 15 points, 3 and 2, also shooting 67% from the field and 100% from the line as well. And then we have Sean Hornacek, who surprised me really because of his mid performance, with poor efficiency shooting for a 22%, but he had a triple-double with 14 points, 10 boards, and 12 assists. But still, I think he could have done a lot better. I guess Mel Reynolds was clamping him up, but for some reason, I kind of doubt that. But outside of that, we have Frederick Williams III, who literally had perfect shooting at all 3 levels with 8 points and 4 boards. But Pete Gaines, Jalen Shaw, Harvey Ray, and Odell Hilliard, they collectively made 7 out of 32 shots, which is, needless to say, poor. And then I honestly think this game would have been much worse if the second string was clicking offensively for the Timberwolves. But fortunately enough, they did as poorly as they did, which kind of kept the Timberwolves in the game. But then when we look at the Timberwolves side, it's pretty clear that although the second string on the Rockets, they performed poorly, the second string on the Timberwolves did worse, with the Rockets bench scoring 10 more points than the Timberwolves. Now, starting from the top, we have O'Shea Ryder, who had 21 points, 10 boards, which was a double-double, of course, on 40% shooting. Ricky Boss had 17, 4, and 5 on 50% shooting. And then we have Wayne Forbes, who surprised me because he's supposed to be that guy, but he only shot for 27% despite the 13-point and 11-board double-double. And his steals were a bit offset by his turnovers, so I think his game performance was kind of weak as well. But then Freddie Mullins, he had a decent outing holding on, but actually, I'm bugging. The man almost had a triple-double with 11 points, 9 boards, and 8 blocks, and that's got to be a record. Hold on a second. So I'm back now, and it definitely was a Timberwolves playoff record, beating Kevin Garnett's record of 6, and was 1 block shy of the 5th on the NBA all-time record list. And I just learned that Tomas Sankovic is 3rd on the Timberwolves list for 7 3-pointers made in a game, and is tied with Wayne Forbes during the regular season. O'Shea Ryder is 5th on the list with 25 boards, and Ricky Boss tied his 17 assists in a game 3 times to be 3rd in Timberwolves history. Now, granted, when I move on to newer versions of 2K, I'm going to bring the data along with me, so these records will in fact be different because I want the FBL to have its own records, but we'll save that for the future. Now that I went down that rabbit hole, I'm perplexed as to why this team got stomped out the way that they did. Tomas, for example, shot for 36%, but then I saw Mel Reynolds, who shot an abysmal 13%, and then Sean Okur did nothing with his 12 minutes, nor did Vaden Goodham, who averaged 3 points during the season. So I think this is another case of living by the 3 and dying by the 3, as I mentioned in the last series. The Timberwolves shot 6 for 22 from the 3-point line, whereas the Rockets almost made double that amount with 11 for 26. So ultimately, let's take a look at game 2 so we can see how things shaped out in this game, so we can have a better assessment as far as what went wrong for the Timberwolves. Now, before we dive into the box score, I got to keep it a buck with you. Curiosity got the best of me, so I had to check the team records for the Rockets, stemming from what we just discussed on game 1. And so in the regular season, Sean Hornacek is the 5th on the list for most 3 points made with a 9, and then Harvey Ray is 4th with the most assists, with 20 assists in a single game. But outside of that, there were no playoff records broken by the Rockets. So with that being said, back to the box scores, and I will say that I couldn't believe my eyes. Pete Gaines went crazy in this game. Just last game, he had 6 points on 20% shooting, but then this game, he had 25 points on 69% shooting. That is wild. And then we have Sean Hornacek, who turned up as well with 22 points, 6 boards, and 6 assists on 8 for 5 or 15 for shooting. And then Eli Primetime Harris had back-to-back double-doubles with 18 points, 14 boards, 9 assists on 41% shooting. Then we have Harvey Ray, who kind of found his groove again, and he had 17 points, 5 boards, shooting for 55%. And then Wallace Vidal had 16 points on 67% shooting across the line. And then Jalen Shaw, he struggled a bit, but it's evident that the bench fared much better this time around compared to the last game. And so for the Timberwolves, yet again, we have O'Shea leading the way with 20 points and 9 boards on 41% shooting. Tomas had a much better game this time around with 18 points on 62% shooting. And then Wayne did better as well with 17, 5 and 5 and 3 on 47% shooting. And then even Mel Reynolds, who went 1 for 8 in the last game, went 6 for 11 with 16 points and 6 assists. So although Ricky was lower on the list this time around from a scoring perspective, he actually was under by 2 points compared to the previous game. But his stat line is kind of bugged out for a 2-guard with 15 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, 4 blocks on 43% shooting. I think the real problem is the bench scoring was only 19 points, just as it was in the last game, whereas the Rockets bench scored 52 points. This is why they got stomped out with Timbs this time around. So although the Timberwolves lost, this was a much better outing for the team. But let's get into game 3. And man, I must say this series was a roller coaster. As soon as the series got to Minnesota, the scoring changed again. Neither team scored over 100 points. And what's wild is that the Timberwolves only scored 9 points in the first quarter. And they were down so bad that even though they won the third and fourth quarters, the Timberwolves still needed a miracle to win the game. That's tough. So looking at the Timberwolves score, or box score, Wayne Forbes finally took the lead in a game, but at the detriment of the other starters. And so I'm wondering if there are some chemistry issues in this locker room, but nonetheless, Wayne had 23 points, 8 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals on 48% shooting, but 20% shooting from 3. Ricky Boss was the second highest scorer with only 11 points. The rest of the team got clamped up. Jeez. Ricky had 11 points and almost 10 assists on 50% shooting. Then we have Sean Okoro, who had one of his better games this time around with 11 points, 4 boards, 2 steals on 40% shooting. But O'Shea Ryder kind of took the day off despite the 10-point and 10-board double-double, only shooting 25% from the field and 0% from 3. Mel Reynolds was down 50% in scoring compared to last game, and his dropped from 55% to 38% percentage in shooting. And then Tomas Sankovic, Darren Ginn, and Freddie Mullins each only made 1 shot, and the rest of their points came from the line. This would have been a tough rut to break through, being down 3-0, but as we know, they ended up getting swept. So let's look at the Rockets box score so we can wrap this portion of the series up. So even the Rockets had an uncharacteristic showing in this game, with Wallace Vidal leading the pack with 20 points, 6 assists, and efficient shooting. I'm not trying to say that Wallace is suspect with his gaming, but I would expect more like Sean Hornacek and Eli Harris to be at the top of the list compared to Wallace. But with that being said, after Wallace, we have Damian Sims, who had a good stat line against almost with a double-double, shooting 64% from the field. And Eli Harris had an off night, but solid night with 12 points, 9 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, and 5 blocks. But he also had 4 turnovers and 29% shooting, so that's why I said he had an off but solid night. And then Sean Hornacek, the torch, he had a double-double, but on 33% shooting. Pete Games, who went off in game 2, his shooting declined by 60%, only scoring 10 points in this game. And then Harvey Ray, he didn't score as much as he normally would, but he almost had a perfect game with 100% shooting across the board, 9 points, 13 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, and a block. But it's really the turnovers that stained his stat line, and that's why I said almost perfect game. But every person in the rotation actually scored points, and it's for this reason why I said during the Rockets team spotlight that this team is the team to beat out west because of their offensive and defensive threats. I think I'm going to have a card right at the top if you want to check that out, but feel free to peruse the channel if you want to learn more about this team. But besides that, the Rockets have a lot of depth compared to most teams in the FBL, and this is why I think it's going to be a struggle for the Pelicans when we get to the next round. But let's move on to game 4. And in the closeout game, the Timberwolves starting 5 put the team in an 18-point deficit with the bench trying to get out of that hole, but the bench wasn't successful in doing so, only bringing the deficit down to 14 by the end of the half. And by the third, The Wolves kept on par with the Rockets, but it wasn't enough to keep their playoff run alive, with the Rockets moving on to the semifinals after sweeping these boys. But if we're looking at the box score, on 36% shooting, Wayne Forbes almost had a 21-point triple-double with 9 boards and 8 assists. 9 of his points came from the line, but he was also in foul trouble. And then Ricky Boss had another good performance with 15 points, 5 assists, and 2 blocks on 70% shooting. Now, this stood out to me because I think I took him lightly in that game where the Timberwolves went up against the Lakers in episode 20. For one, I didn't realize how young Ricky is. 2, I also didn't realize that he is an 84 overall, although he hasn't progressed thus far in the season. But 3, I didn't realize that his perimeter defense is an 81, steal is a 73, block is an 84, with a lateral quickness of 81, and help defense IQ of an 81, as well as other solid defensive attributes. It's no wonder why Ricky said, and I quote, "All I know is that I'm the best defender in the league right now. There's no way the DPOY shouldn't have gone to me." I even went a little further to compare the stat lines between Ricky and Aaron Lawrence, and looking at the stats alone, I would beg to differ, but you let me know down in the comments if you think Ricky Boss deserved the DPOY over Aaron Lawrence. But now that I've pulled myself out of that rabbit hole, O'Shea Ryder has a solid 15-point and 12 rebound double-double with 6 assists and 50% shooting. Tomas Sankovic doubled his points this time around on 63% shooting compared to 25% in the previous game. Sean Okur had a similar game to game 3 with worse shooting. Mel was on par with the last game in scoring, but he had 5 more boards than in game 3 with better shooting. And although the bench was able to score more this time around, they still scored 13 points less than the Rockets bench. In fact, across the 4 games, the Rockets bench outscored the Timberwolves bench by 62 points. So I'm curious to see how this team rebuilds itself in the offseason, since literally every player in the league will be a free agent. So I'm definitely going to keep my eye out for Ricky to see where he goes and to see how he performs. And as for the Rockets, this is how you close out a series. Sean Hornacek finally turned up with 25 points, 8 boards, 4 assists on 45% shooting. Eli Primetime Harris had another double-double with 22 points, 12 boards, 8 assists, and 2 blocks. Pete Gaines again had a double-digit scoring game with, not 14, but 16 points, 5 boards, and 2 assists. I don't know if y'all remember this, but Pete filled in for Eli when Eli was out with an injury, and I would say he held his own then, but it's even better to see him contribute as part of the second string at this point. And then we have Frederick Williams III. He's another one whose performance ebbs and flows, but when he's on 5th gear, averaging a point a minute in this game with 14 points and 86% shooting, 15 points on 86% shooting. And then Harvey Ray turned up again with 11 points, 7 boards, and 4 assists. Damian Sims with a 10-point and 11 assist double-double. Wallace Vidal, he dropped 50% in scoring this game, but he was still impactful with 6 assists, 2 steals, and a block. And then Jalen contributed a little with his scoring as well. But overall, I know that the Pelicans are going to have a battle on their hands if they want to move on in the playoffs. I'll keep it a buck. I don't know how I'm going to set the matchups so that I'll be able to handle the threats from the starting 5, as well as the threats from Pete Gaines, Frederick Williams, and Harvey Ray on the second string. But big win for the Rockets, and I want to also say big shout out to Hoodie Sean again, because Eli Harris is one of his characters. I think, in fact, Eli Harris might be one of the flagship characters that Hoodie Sean created. So as you can see, Eli Harris is like that. But it's time for us to move on to the next series, where we have the Spurs going up against my Mavericks. So if you remember the screen at the beginning of the episode, the reverse to what happened to the Pelicans is what happened to the Mavericks. We essentially lost in 6 games, and I can't hold you, this loss hurt. Now granted, I didn't get to play as many games with the Mavericks given the randomizer approach I took, as well as the season schedule, but I will say that the experience was much better than the infamous game against the Knicks in episode 5. But to set the stage, the Spurs at this point in time, they had 2 key injuries with Seth Gibbs and Edmund Mack out, who were the Spurs shooters outside of Spencer Hwang. And so in episode 20, the Spurs, as we saw, struggled against the Pelicans, losing the last 3 games in the series to the Pelicans and in the last month of the season. So in fact, the Spurs won 6 out of 15 games, which is among one of the many reasons why the Pelicans were able to qualify for the playoffs. But getting into game one, I will say that the Spurs started off hot with a 13-7 point run, but the Mavs fought back to not only close the deficit, but they were also able to take on an 8-point lead by the end of the first. And going into the second, the Spurs started the quarter yet again with another run, scoring 12 points to the Mavs 4, and then they went on to end the half tied at 49. So it was at this point I really started to think through when I should hop in, but I wanted to see if the team could pull through on their own given what happened in the first quarter. And then, during the third, the teams continued to battle out with several lead changes, but the Mavs were able to hold on to a 4-point lead by the end of it all. This is where things got very interesting in the fourth. The momentum shifted several times between the two teams, enough to where I really had to pause the game and really think about whether I was going to hop in at around the 5-minute mark. And at this point, the Mavs were up by 4, so I decided to take a chance and bet on the team. I ended up letting the sim run a little bit longer, which fortunately resulted in the Mavs going on a run to beat the Spurs 111-101. Now, Neil Upshaw Jr. had a stellar game with 25 points, 7 boards, 7 assists, and 2 steals on 44% shooting, which I'm especially happy about because on average against the Spurs, he scores 17 points, and against the Western Conference teams in general, he scores between 9 and 19 points. And that's mainly because Chase, he handles the ball a lot as well, and he needs to help out offensively. So that's probably taking away from Neil's effectiveness. But then there's also the fact about defensive matchups. And so that's where they kind of, I guess the term is share the load. And so Chase himself, he had 24 points, 4, 5, 2, and 2 with 3 turnovers, shooting 53%. My G Duncan Webb, he had 18, 8, and 3 on 53% shooting. And Jermaine Armstrong, he had 14 on 83% shooting, which stood out to me because Jermaine averaged 6 points per game during the regular season and 8 points a game against the Spurs in general. So to me, that was very good production. And at this point, I was hoping Jermaine would keep this up throughout the course of the series. But then you'll see that we have very little production from Eddie Yao, who had 6, 3, 3, and 2 on 23% shooting, which is god awful for Eddie. And then my other guy, Steve Levins, who got absolutely clamped up shooting for 10%, although he had 12 boards, 4 assists, and 4 steals. Compared to the production that we had during the last week of the season, I would say the last month really when I made the switch, this was very poor outing for Steve. And then Rod McGee, he shot poorly himself, as well as Brevin Ivy. So it was a bit of a mixed bag for the Mavs, but let's take a look at the Spurs box score. Now, Spencer Huang is a monster, my G's. He had a 32-point double-double with 11 boards, 6 assists, shooting 12 for 20 from the field, 75% from the three-point line, and 100% from the free throw line. He did have 4 turnovers, but overall it's a solid stat line despite that. But then, I can't hold you, I couldn't even remember who S. Kinney was, and I learned that this is the 21-year-old Sadiq Kinsey. Now, mind you, I never noticed him throughout the season, but he did play 60 games over the regular season and averaged about 8 points. So the 12, 3, and 3 isn't too crazy, but when you look at the rest of the team and their performance, things become a little bit clearer. So for example, Rex Knight with his 9 points, 3 boards, and 3 assists on 75% shooting, on average, he scored 9 points a game during the regular season, but against the Mavs, he averaged 11. Then you have Malik Ashley. On average, he scored about 9 points against the Mavs, but his stat line was on par with how he's played against us. But what stands out the most is Abe Price, who had 8 points. Don't get me wrong, the 8 points is standard for him in general on the season and against the Mavs, but it's the 3 for 13 that stood out. So although Abe missed a lot of shots, the scoring between the two teams was fairly similar, with the Spurs shooting 39 for 76 and the Mavs shooting 42 for 97. Case in point, the point differential between the two benches was 2. And the real difference was really the shots made beyond the arc, where the Spurs had 13 compared to the Mavs 16. Now, one might argue that this win was luck, with all things being considered, and even if it was, you best believe I was going to take it. So, on to game 2. Now, in the first 6 minutes of the game, fam, the Spurs went on a 20-4 run, and at this point, the sim had me second guessing the rotation that I put in place. I was like, maybe I should give Rod more minutes the way the team is playing right now, but by the end of the quarter, the team was only down by 9 points. In the second, things didn't get any better. The secondary went on a 15-8 run, but then by the half, the Mavs were down by 16. After the break, the Mavs went on a 13-8 run this time and went on to win the quarter by 15 to bring the game to within 1 point. Then in the fourth, the Spurs went on a 19-11 run, so I hopped in at the 6-minute mark to see if I could help the team secure the win because this whole back and forth was stressing me out. As soon as we hop in, Steve passed the rock to Neil Upshaw Jr. Rex Knight and Malik Ashley quickly pull a double team on him, which left Chase wide open to sprint towards the rim for a quick 2 points because every possession had to count. Not only that, the Mavs also needed to get stops to get back in the game. Now in the next possession, Chase also noticed that off the pick, Steve and Neil decided to focus on Spencer Huang, leaving Joel's Cousins wide open in the post. But rushing back, Chase ended up fouling Joel, helping the Spurs get 3 points the old-fashioned way. Fast forward, here we have Sean Fisher playing Chase real close, which he noticed, and he used that to his advantage to sprint towards the basket for another 2 points. Now down by 8, Eddie Yao struggled to keep up with Vashawn Fisher, who easily laid up the ball despite the contest. Now Chase was on attack mode every time Vashawn was guarding him, and this time he blew past Vashawn for a moving shot from 13 feet. Mavs is still down by 8. And I will say that it seemed as if every time we scored, the Spurs would pay us in kind with no fight from the defense. But I will say that Chase had his eyes up and noticed that mismatch between Eddie Yao and Joel Cousins in the post. Chase took a chance leaving Vashawn Fisher open beyond the arc, which fortunately paid off, but then Duncan Webb left his man open, which resulted in Malik Ashley getting the putback. Now our defense was looking goofy in these minutes, and it felt as if the only person that was trying to score and create plays was Chase. Fast forward again to where Steve got a much needed stop on Rex Knight, and on the fast break, Chase made the right decision to wait rather than shooting the shot to find Eddie Yao driving to the basket for a quick 2 points. And with under 3 minutes to go, the Mavs were still down by 6. Now, not too long after that, Chase was guarding Vashawn close, but I can't lie. Vashawn hit Chase with a nice move to get 2 points in the paint, bringing the score to 138 to 130. And the Mavs weren't able to score again, and at the 2-minute mark, the team made the same mistake as before on the pick and roll. Rather than switching and staying with Joel Cousins, Steve switched onto Rex Knight, leaving the paint wide open. And after a quick timeout, Chase focused on getting points on the board quickly with the hopes of the team getting a stop on the other end to convert into additional points, but that did not happen. In fact, the defense was so sloppy again and again to where Steve got cooked and ended up fouling Joel Cousins, as you can see right here. And at this point, with a minute and 30 seconds left, this game was pretty much over. I mean, between the offense not clicking and the poor defensive schemes, this led to the Mavs losing at home, which I was very disappointed about. And looking at the box score, Chase did as much as he could with 28 points, 5 boards, and 5 assists on 68% shooting. Duncan Webb had a good game as well with 24 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, 1 block, and 53% shooting. And then Neil Upshaw, he had close to a double-double with 17 points and 9 assists on 62% shooting, and even got some contribution from Brevin Ivy and Leo Marai, a name that I haven't said in a while, mind you, who both had 11 points. Now Steve, he had close to a double-double with 9 points and 9 boards, but he was struggling offensively, shooting 27% from the field. And Jermaine Armstrong, I would say, contributed, but not as much as he did in game 1. But I don't want to forget about Hayden Keefe, who the scouts always seem to say give less minutes to. He had perfect shooting in both games 1 and 2. I wish I would have noticed that sooner and maybe would have switched up some things, because defensively, I know he's better on the interior, but he's of smaller height. I think it's like 6'5", 6'6", maybe even 6'7". One will argue his defensive style is kind of like Gary Payton II, but we all have 20/20 vision in hindsight. So some observations I made in this game were that 1, Steve Levens was struggling against Spencer, and he couldn't get the same level of stops we saw in the last month of the season. And then Eddie was pretty gassed by the 4th and wasn't as effective as I would like, but I let it rock for one more game because I figured might as well test it out one more time before I made any changes. As for the Spurs, Spencer absolutely destroyed us this game with 40 points, 5 boards, 11 assists on 82, 88, and 100% shooting. This was followed up by A. Price, who had a solid 23 points on 67% shooting. Then Joel Cousins, my goodness, he almost had a double-double with 20 points, 9 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, and 4 blocks on 54% shooting. And sheesh, Malik Ashley went off as well with 19 on 75% shooting. As did Vashawn with 10 points, 5 boards, and 4 assists on 42% shooting. I would say not even this is fact at this point. The Spurs bench outscored the Mavs bench 61-49, which was the driving factor for this loss. I mean, with the series now tied at 1, Game 3 would be very important because the momentum would favor the victor, especially considering the Spurs would be at home. So then Game 4 would also be in San Antonio. And so this was something that was about to happen. Unfortunately, we just weren't prepared for it. Now, off G, the scout advised that I give more minutes to Jermaine Armstrong and Brevin Ivy, which I did, but I refused to take away minutes from Steve Levens because we needed his presence in those critical moments. At least, that's what I told myself in my mind. But in hindsight, I might have been able to swap out the minutes of Steve and Jermaine or put Hayden Keefe onto Spencer Wang, but it is what it is. The first quarter was a bit slow in scoring, but it was still action-packed with a number of lead changes ending with the tie at 31 points. And in the second, the battle continued with even more lead changes, but at the half, the Mavs were down by 11 points. Now, although the Spurs went on a huge run in the third, the Mavs were able to take the quarter by 3 points to bring the deficit down to 7. But that's when it happened. In the fourth, at the 2-minute mark, the Spurs went on an 8-2 point run and closed the game out, beating the Mavs 124-113. I was shocked. I couldn't figure out what happened, and then looking at the Spurs box score, it hit me. Now, what was different, you ask? Well, Seth Gibbs came back sooner than expected and quickly contributed to the Spurs offense. Now, the target date for him to come back was the equivalent of May 2nd, which would have been after the series ended, but he surprised everyone and came back on April 22nd. Now, he wasn't as efficient as he could be, but Seth was able to score 16 points on 27% shooting with 8 for 8 from the free throw line, which definitely we weren't prepared for. Now, mind you, he was still technically injured with knee tendonitis, but this in turn took a lot of pressure off of Jeffrey Humphreys to score and created more space for Spencer Wang, Abe Price, and Malik Ashley to do their thing. Spencer went off again with another double-double with 34 points and 18 boards on 50% shooting and 93% from the free throw line. And to recap for some of y'all that may not know this, Spencer was actually the all-star captain for the West, but he didn't get to play because of an injury. And he was also on the MVP ballot until he got injured. So his stat line isn't surprising. I'm just happy that he didn't drop 50 on us. Now, Abe Price, he went 7 for 7 at the line and had 20 on us. Malik Ashley again with the double-digit point game. And unfortunately, even Kenny Lloyd got off, or went off, pause, with 12 points. He scored, on average, 5 points per game during the season. So literally everybody was hooping and everybody in the rotation scored on us, which is tough. Now, as for the Mavs, you could clearly see that Chase got clamped up, only scoring 18 points, 8 boards, 9 assists on 36% shooting. Neal himself, he had 14, 3, and 32 on 55% shooting. And Duncan, he fell all the way off from the 24 points he scored in the last game down to 12 points in this game. And Eddie himself, he doubled his scoring compared to the last game with 14 points, which means that in the last game he only had 7, if you're not able to do the math. Now, Rod McGee, who had 3 points, ended up with 12 points and 6 boards this game. Steve Levens had another double-double, but on 31% shooting. So really, the big difference between game 3 and the first 2 games was Chase's performance and the fact that despite this, he still scored more than the rest of the team. But if you look to the right, you'll see that 1, Neal fouled out, 2, Steve and Brevin both had 8 fouls between the two of them, and even 3, Chase had 3 fouls. Thus, the team gave up 38 points at the free throw line compared to the 20 the team earned. So that 18-point differential contributed to this loss, which is linked to the poor defense that we saw during game 2. So this meant that I had to go back to the drawing board with this new information and try to salvage the series by switching up the rotation as well as the matchups. So let's talk about game 4. So since Eddie was fatigued, I gave more minutes to Brevin Ivy so that we could use Eddie at his full energy in the second string to provide more playmaking and depth. I also made some adjustments to the defensive matchups to see if we could stop the threats from Abe Price and Seth Gibbs from the perimeter. And then finally, I assigned Duncan Webb to Spencer Wang since it seemed as if Steve was struggling to guard him, and put Steve on Vasson Fisher for game 4. But getting into the sim, this is the first time throughout the entire series where the team finished the first quarter with a lead. And after 9 lead changes in the second, the Spurs took a 5-point lead going into the second half. But by the end of the third, that lead grew to 10 points. And in the fourth, the team was still down by 9 at the 5-minute mark, so I hopped in to try to bring the team back because if not, the series would be in jeopardy. Now off the rip, Duncan helped Steven Levins in the paint to stop a layup from Joel Cousins, which was rewarded on the other end when Chase passed the rock to Duncan in the paint for a double clutch reverse dunk and one. I expected a dunk, but not a double clutch reverse dunk. It's stuff like this that gets me excited during games. First, a big stop, and then a good ball movement and great finish at the rack. Now down by 4, Chase saw Neal leaking and threw a dot that ended up with a nice layup at the rim, now only a 2-point deficit. And on the next play, this was the first time I got to see Spencer versus Duncan, but I didn't see Rex Knight cutting, losing Brevin on the perimeter, which led to an easy 2 points. The score is now 100 to 104. Now fast forward a few seconds, and yet again Rex Knight not only scored, but he drew contact from Brevin to get to the line. And then fast forward again, the team showed some poise despite missing on the fast break opportunity, but they reset and got back on the board. But just as in game 3, every time we scored, so did the Spurs, and again this came from Rex Knight and Brevin not guarding him. It was enough for Chase to just show his frustration on the court. But Duncan would eventually get fouled by Spencer Wang, which would give us a little bit of time to catch our bearings after the consistent back and forth. But fortunately for us, Duncan is actually clutch and hit both of his free throws, bringing the game to within 2 points. Now soon after, we went back to being sloppy again on defense, man. And Chase had to choose between Vashon and Malik to guard, so he chose Vashon to prevent the 3, but Steve failed to guard up Malik, and he just scored an easy 2 points from 20 feet. Now down by 4, Neal passed the rock to Duncan, who again gets fouled, and he missed the first free throw. And at this point, Brevin wasn't doing what I needed him to do, so I had Eddie brought back in, and fortunately, Duncan made the second free throw. Now, Eddie did no better on defense and was taking wild shots, as you can see here. I guess he wanted to save the day, but he missed. We got another opportunity to tie the game, and Eddie chose to take another contested shot and ended up losing game 4. We were down bad in the series, 3-1. Now, despite the loss, I think that the defensive matchup I had with Duncan guarding Spencer actually worked, because Spencer, he only had 14 points this game, but he still was able to eke out a double-double with 14 assists and 8 boards. But if you look at the top, you can see that Rex Knight got busy. You hear me? 26 points, which is almost 3 times the scoring average for the regular season and double what he normally scores against the Mavs. And on top of that, Rex had 4 boards, 4 assists, 3 steals on 69% shooting. This was all on Brevin's head top. I shook my head when I saw this. Now, Malik, he continued the momentum from game 3 with 17 points, 2 boards, and 4 assists on 50% shooting. Joel Cousins, this time around, he had 15 points, and Seth Gibbs was slowed down a bit to where he only scored 11 points, which I'm very happy about. But yet again, almost the entire team got buckets on the Mavs' head, with the exception of Abe Price, who was a dud. But I can't talk too much because we lost the game, but it wasn't for a lack of trying. Duncan showed up again with 26 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, and a block on 9 for 16 shooting. Chase had 16, 9, and 9 on 50% shooting, and Brevin actually contributed offensively with 14 and 2, but Neal himself, he had a bad scoring game. He had a bad day in general with 11 points. And Steve and Eddie, they were pretty bad as well. They weren't as impactful as we needed them to be given the time we gave them. And at this point, this team would need a miracle, but it was on to game 5. Now, by the end of the first, it was the same song with the Mavs down by 11 points, even after making some of the recommended changes from the scouts. And in the second, the team was able to maintain and come back, but by the end of the half, they were still down by 11 points. Now, something shifted towards the end of the third with several lead changes, but the Mavs ended up taking a 2-point lead at the end of the quarter. But then in the fourth, the Mavs went on a run to beat the Spurs by 10 points, which absolutely shocked me. The team actually pulled through, so now the series was 3-2. I had high hopes that we could tie the series, but there's that one caveat that we were heading back to San Antonio. Now, you should be just as flabbergasted as I was when I saw the box score. Duncan continued to hoop with 27 points, 3 boards, 3 assists, and 3 steals on 50% shooting. Steve Levins finally gave us the game that I've been looking for the entire series with 23 points and 9 boards. Even Neal managed to stay out of foul trouble and had an 18-point double-double with 12 assists and 4 steals. But then, here's where things got spooky, with both Leo Marai and Hayden Keith both scoring 17 points, with Leo shooting 60% from the field and Hayden shooting 71% from the field. Chase, in fact, scored less than them and pretty much got clamped up, only shooting 3 for 14 for a whopping 21%. And yet, the team won? I guess after being livid in Game 4, Chase took the stance of show me what you got. I don't know, but the team definitely stood up for this win. And to keep it a stack, I'm still surprised that the Spurs lost because Spencer bounced back this game with 33 points, 11 boards, and 5 assists on 50% shooting, and he had 13 for 13 free throws. Seth Gibbs went off as well with 22 points, 5 boards, and 2 assists with 13 for 13 free throws. Abe Price had 20 on 6 and 11. Jeffrey Humphreys had 16 on 5 and 10. I couldn't understand it. We gave up 47 points at the free throw line and committed 34 team fouls. I can only chalk this up to the fact that the Mavericks wanted to win the game. They made 47 shots compared to the Spurs, who made 37. But everything else was fairly even, with the exception of the Spurs making more 3 points and 12 more from the free throw line. But nonetheless, a win is a win. Now, in Game 6, it's do or die for the Mavs. If they win, they survive and get to go to Game 7, but if they lose, their playoff run comes to an end. So the pressure was pretty heavy for the Mavs, especially since they were in San Antonio. And now, I will say that the Mavs kept things close in the first, but by the second, fam, they were down by 22 points. I thought about hopping in, but I was like, let me see how the third quarter goes before making a decision, but nah. The Mavs didn't have it in them for Game 6, fam. Going into the fourth, they were down by 30 points. I didn't even bother hopping in and just sat there looking at the screen in disbelief. The Mavs will end up losing Game 6 by 38 points. And looking at the box score, you can see that Spencer Wang went off with a 47-point triple-double. That's 15 boards, 14 assists, 3 steals, 1 block on 70, 70, and 100% shooting. In fact, Spencer broke George Gervin's playoff record for total points with this 47-point game. And in addition to this, Spencer tied his own and Marco Bellinelli's playoff record for most 3 points made in a game, which was 7 in this game. Seth Gibbs went off again with 26 points and 4 boards on 61% shooting. Abe Price, Jeffrey Humphreys, and Rex Knight all did their thing respectively from a scoring perspective, with Rex having 11, 7, and 7. As a matter of fact, only 2 people out of the 10-man rotation shot for under 50%, which to me means the team did poorly guarding, not to mention the 23 points that they gave away at the line. So full disclosure, you'll find that the audio for the mic constantly is changing, and that's because I can't sit still, and secondly, I can't figure out the right angle for this microphone just yet. I know, shocker, but bear with me, we'll get it together soon enough. But looking at the Mavs box score, and things become clear very quickly. Steve Levens fouled out within 11 minutes, which, as you know, if you've been watching the series, Steve has been our defensive anchor at the 5 slot. So without him, we're weak on the interior and really don't get many boards. On top of that, Brevin Ivy was in foul trouble with 4 fouls, and Duncan Webb came close to fouling out with 5 fouls. Chase, he tried the best to keep the Mavs in the game with 38 points, 6 boards, and 4 assists on 58% shooting, which is a stark difference compared to the past 2 games. But then Neil, I wish he would have contributed more, but he had 18 points on 40% shooting and missed every one of his 3-point shots. And then everyone else scored 9 or less points, which wasn't going to cut it. The Spurs bench outscored the Mavs bench by 21 points, and the Spurs made 7 more 3-point shots compared to the Mavericks. This, my friend, this was a tough loss to say the least, given the run that the Mavs had all season long. Unfortunately, we just folded under the pressure. Hopefully, they'll get back in the playoffs next season, but congrats to the Spurs. The Lakers will have a battle on their hands. Now, before we dive into the Suns versus Lakers series, let's recap what I thought about the Lakers' last game of the season up against the Suns. Ultimately, this was a tough loss to swallow, especially when you look at the final outcome of the regular season. So what do I mean by that? Look at this, fam. When I say I sold, I really sold. Because of this loss to the Suns, the Lakers are not the 1 seed, and we ended up tying from a win-loss perspective with the Warriors. So, after that loss, I had to do some digging to understand what happened in the last game to where we lost that badly to a team I fully expected to beat. And after some digging, I found the answer. And this goes all the way back to the rotations I made after finding out that Richard Green was injured in episode 20. So, I inadvertently went and placed AC Norris at the 3 when I wanted to put Sheldon Moss at that position because Sheldon, although he had poor shooting attributes, meaning an 84 close shot rating, 69 mid-range, and 67 three-point shot, his defensive attributes were 71 on the interior but an 86 on the perimeter. So because of that, I wanted to neutralize the threats from Jimmy Taylor and Kendall Kaysen in the second string. Now, AC Norris has some good shooting attributes, but his interior defense is what I really wanted. But putting AC at the 3 created more of a defensive liability rather than an offensive benefit. Now, Alonzo Evans is a better perimeter shooter, but defensively, he's a bit sus. So I had him at the 2 and the 3 to help us get some buckets. Now, since I had AC on the perimeter, I think this is part of the reason why the Suns mixed us up in that game. And after realizing this, I ended up making the following changes. First, I moved Paolo to the second string at the 4, but moved Sidney Frazier up to the starting lineup at the 4. So even if Sidney is better guarding the perimeter with the 76 attribute compared to his 35 interior attribute, I was hoping that his 6'10 frame would help deter those trying to get into the paint, plus I still had Gilbert Hajiwara at the 5 position to protect the rim. In addition to this, I made Alonzo focus solely on the 2 position and made Sheldon stick to the 3. So now that you, as well as myself, understand how I fumbled the last game of the season and how I adjusted, let's get into the Suns vs Lakers series. Now, the first quarter was intense with a few runs between the two teams, with the Suns pulling away with the lead. But by the end of the first, the Lakers took a 1-point lead with 5 seconds left in the quarter. And at the half, the Lakers maintained that 1-point lead after several lead changes throughout the second. And in the third, you could tell it was a very hyper defensive game because only 2 points were scored in the first 3 minutes of the quarter. And after 9 lead changes, the Suns ended up taking the quarter and the lead by 5 points. And then in the fourth, the Lakers came back to tie the game with 7 minutes left in the quarter. Now, it was at this point, as in all those other instances earlier in the video, where I really thought about hopping in, but I decided to let it rock. And after this point, the Lakers went on a 21-13 run to win game 1. Now, the starting 5 did exactly what I needed them to do, and that includes Sidney Frazier. But let's start at the top with Deion King, who had 26 points, 14 boards, and 4 assists on 36% shooting, but he got to the line a lot, getting 16 of his 26 points from there. And then we have Raphael, who had a good game as well with 22 points, 4 boards, 4 assists, and 2 steals on 50% shooting, with 7 points coming from the line, but both Deion and Raphael had 3 fouls apiece. Then we have Gilbert Hajiwara, who had a 14-point double-double with 15 boards, which is pretty insane, but he also shot 36% from the field, which isn't too bad. I'm just happy that Gilbert is both able to score, get some board. We just need him to get more blocks, and then I think we'll be golden. Then we have Leo Yamasaki. He continued the momentum from the regular season with a 13.6 board game, but sheesh, he had 4 on 13 shooting and 11 shots coming from the 3-point line. Jeez. And then Sidney surprisingly had almost perfect shooting and scored 9 points, which I'll gladly take because that might have been the game changer since he averaged 3 points over the course of the regular season, and he scored 4 points in the last game against the Suns. So this is a big step up compared to those games. And then we have Pablo, who seemed to be adjusting to the new lineup. And plus, I think Omari Fofana probably gave him problems to keep it a buck with you. But then we have Alonzo, who scored 7, which is better than his average of 5 on the season and the 6 on the season against the Suns. So I'll take that. And then finally, we have Sheldon Moss. He didn't do what we needed defensively with the negative plus minus, but he scored over his average of 5 on the season and 5 against the Suns, so we'll take it. Now, the Suns box score says a lot if you know what's going on, so bear with me if this is your first time watching one of these vids. The Suns starting 5 is Kim Shafino, Jace Van Rossum, Chris Cross, Guy Costa, and Harvey Outlaw. Now, with that being said, the starting 5 in this case scored 54 out of 106 points, which means the bench scored just as many as the starting 5, which is reinforced by this box score. Harvey Outlaw scored almost 3 times what he did in the regular season on 67% shooting and almost 5 times more than what he normally scores against the Lakers. Jimmy Taylor, who I've been raving about over the past couple of episodes, went off as well with 20 points, 3 boards, 5 assists on 57% shooting, which is way better than I would expect of him to do. And if you know, you know. Jimmy scored double what he normally scores against the Lakers. Omari Fofana had a really good game with 19 points, 9 boards, and 4 assists on 75% shooting. But then we have the team lead in Chris Cross, who got clamped up fortunately on 38% shooting, although he got 7 points from the line and 17 points overall. Now afterwards, there's a big drop off in scoring from 17 points to Kim Shafino's 8 points. So let's get into game 2. The first quarter was a battle just as in game 1, but it seemed as if the Lakers had more poise this time around, taking a 12-point lead by the end of the quarter. The second string gave up the lead, which meant the Suns were down only by 2 points going into halftime. Now, eventually in the third, the Lakers were down by at least 15 points, which was a drastic change compared to the first quarter. However, the Lakers fought their way back into the game, bringing the deficit down to 5 by the end of the quarter, and the fourth quarter was just as intense as the other quarters. With under 4 minutes left in the fourth, the team surprised me and came back with under 2 minutes left to go, and they went on an 18-9 point run to win the game by 2 points. What a roller coaster of a game. Now this was absolutely Raphael's time to shine with 23 points, 8 boards, 3 assists, unfortunately on 37% shooting, and Deion King came through again with another double-double with 18 points, 11 boards, 5 assists, and 2 steals on 45% shooting and 80% from the line. Leo Yamasaki shined again against the Suns. Last game he had 13 points with 7 boards, and in this game he had 17 points with 7 boards on 50% shooting. And Pablo, he seemed to have adjusted well, although he is the 6th man in the rotation for this series with 7 more points this game than he had in the last game. And then finally we have Gilbert, who maintained his momentum from game 1 with 15 points, 7 boards, so it wasn't a double-double, and he also had 4 assists with way better efficiency. Now this time around, Chris Cross came to play, scoring 30 with 4, 4, and 3 on 58% shooting. This was on par to how he performed against the Lakers during the regular season, so I'm guessing Raphael was struggling to guard him this game. But then we have Omari Fofana, who continued the momentum from the last game by scoring 19 points again with 7 boards and 4 assists. And then I must say, my guy Jimmy Taylor continued to perform. I can't lie, I'm really thinking about trying to pick him up for one of my teams in the offseason. For this game, Jimmy had 16 points on 43% shooting, but I will admit that he needs to work on his playmaking, because if I'm going to take him on the team, 1 assist per game on 23 minutes is not going to cut it. If anything, I may continue to have him roll with the second string to add some scoring depth, but I don't know. There's still plenty of time before the offseason. Now, Kim Shafino, he had a game on par with game 1 with 10 points, 6 boards, and 4 assists, but his efficiency still needs a lot of work, I must admit that. And then we have Orlando Napier, who was close to 10 points with 3 boards on 50% shooting, which caught my attention because I don't think I've ever talked about Orlando yet this entire season. So, on the season, he averaged 9 points, 4 boards, 2 assists, and almost a steal on 42% shooting from the field, 39% from the 3, and 83% from the line. Against the Lakers, Orlando averaged 7 points, 4 boards, 2 assists on 32% shooting, so I'd say he performed a little bit better than his average. In any case, this game was a little bit too close for my comfort, especially since the Lakers are going to Phoenix for game 3, but I didn't believe changes needed to be made yet until something crazy happened in the game, so on to game 3. Now, just as the first 2 games, the first quarter of this game was filled with many lead changes, but the Lakers overcame to win the quarter by 6 points. And in the second quarter, the Lakers went on a mean run, but the Suns eventually came back to within 4 at the half. Now, the Suns tried their best to come back after the half, but by the end of the third, the Lakers had a mean 14-point lead. I mean, it was mean for them, but great for us. And in the fourth, it felt as if the Lakers were coasting, just trying to do enough to keep the lead, but not to lose the game. But at the end of it all, the Lakers end up beating the Suns by 7 points, which I'm happy about. As long as we're not losing, I'm Gucci. Alright, so Chris Cross struggled a bit compared to game 2, where he had 30 points versus the 20 here, and the 50% shooting versus the 38% shooting during the game. So it's either Chris had an off night or Raphael finally figured him out. I mean, Chris only hit 6 shots on the game, 4 of which were threes, and then 4 points from the line. Now, Kim Shafino had a much better game from an efficiency standpoint with 15 points on 50% shooting, but speaking of Kim, you know, well, maybe you don't know if you knew, but I've been comparing Jimmy Taylor and Kim a lot over the past couple episodes, shoot, even in this episode like I'm about to do right now, but in this game, Jimmy fell all the way off with 7 points on 30% shooting. This is by far Jimmy's worst game in a month. Now for context, I put Xander Underwood as Jimmy's matchup, so it seemed as if during this game, Xander finally was able to do what I needed him to do since he had a plus-minus of 3 compared to -15 and -5 in games 1 and 2 respectively. Now Harvey Outlaw, he done did it again with 15 points and 9 boards on 40% shooting, which was much better than his performance in game 2, I'll admit that, as did Horst Dangerous, who had 11, which was over his average of 8 points in the regular season and 10 against the Lakers, which surprised me. But a number of his points did come from the line with 33% shooting from the field, so that's interesting as well. And then now we have Omari, who didn't score as much as he did in the first game, but still a solid stat line with 10 points, 7 boards, and 5 assists on 50% shooting. And hold on, this man also had 6 blocks. Sheesh. Now, Orlando Napier, he also had 10 points on the game, and I'll be honest, I'm definitely going to keep my eye out for Orlando, especially in the offseason, just to see where he goes for 1, and 2, to see how he develops, because I'm actually curious about it. I don't plan to pull Orlando onto a team. I'm just being a geek. But if you count it, that's about 6 players with double-digit scoring compared to the 4 players on the Lakers. Now, another thing I noticed, I don't know if you noticed this, but at the very bottom, there's Kendall Kaysen. He used to be in the starting 5, but he only played for 10 minutes and he didn't take a single shot. And it turned out that Kendall got injured in this game and wasn't expected to be back until the start of season 2, which is tough because although he doesn't score much, Kendall was definitely a defensive force for the Suns. And as for the Lakers, Raphael's shooting percentages were better in this game compared to the last game with 24 points, 6 boards, and 6 assists. Gilbert Hajiwara had a solid double-double with 16 points, 17 boards, 3 assists, and 4 blocks on 62% shooting. And then both Leo Yamasaki and Sidney Frazier had 10-point games with 57% shooting, and then you'll see that the rest of the team had single-digit scoring. Now, really, in my opinion, the difference between the two teams is a matter of efficiency and blocks. The Lakers shot 9 more shots and made 7 more shots than the Suns, but the Suns got to the line way more than the Lakers did. And on top of that, I found that very few people on the Lakers get blocks consistently. So for example, in game 1, the team had a total of 3 blocks, 2 of which came from AC Norris and 1 from Sidney Frazier. And then in game 2, the team had a total of 6 with 2 coming from Gilbert, 2 coming from AC, 1 from Xander, and 1 from Sidney. And then here in this game, the team had a total of 6 with 4 coming from Gilbert and 2 from Deion King. So when you compare this to the Suns who had 9, 5, and 14, it starts to make sense as to why the games were so close as they were. Now on to game 4. Now, I can't hold you, I meant to simcast the game, but I ended up simulating the game outright, and the Lakers, fortunately for me, won the game, finishing the sweep of the Suns. So let's take a look at what went on. And in this game, it's either Chris Cross didn't show up at all or Raphael clamped Chris all the way up. Chris ended up with 8 points, 5 boards, and 8 assists, shooting 3 for 11, and it only got to the line once. Sheesh. But going back to the top, Jimmy Taylor was at it again, filling in from a scoring perspective for Chris with 21 points, 5 boards, 4 assists on 58% shooting. Horst Dangerous again had a solid game, improving upon his scoring since game 3 with 16 points, 2 boards, and 3 assists on 78% shooting. And then Kim Fictional, he also had the same type of momentum he had from game 3, going with 15 points, 2 boards, 5 assists, 1 steal, and 2 blocks on 54% shooting. Orlando Napier again had another 10-point game with 4 boards and 2 assists, followed by Omari Fofana, who had 9 points, 11 boards, and 4 assists. And then you see the rest of the starting 5. So going back to Chris, he only had 8. Jace Van Rossum had 7. Guy Costa had 6. Harvey Outlaw had 6. Only Kim was able to score over 10 points. And after looking at this more closely, the Suns starting 5 had a total of 43 points, which is wild. And ooh-wee! Raphael was feasting this game, fam. 37 of them things, 6 boards, 2 assists on 50% shooting. Deion King with a 20-point double-double, 12 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals, and a block, also on 50% shooting. And then Gilbert Hajiwara also having a double-double with 14 points, 12 boards, 3 assists on 50% shooting. This is wild. So I don't know what the Lakers were on this game. Dion 6'2" King had 12 boards. 3 of the starting 5 had 50% from field shooting. Even Alonzo Evans and Sidney Frazier performed better than normal with 12 points and 7 points respectively. Now, Leo Yamasaki didn't score a lot. In fact, this was his worst game from a scoring perspective since the second to last week of the season and in the series, but he did make a solid contribution with 3 boards, 5 assists, and 2 steals. Now, my biggest concern is the second string's consistency and defense. Technically, the best scorer right now is supposed to be Pablo Knox, and he is inconsistent, followed by Alonzo Evans, who is also inconsistent. So I can only hope that Xander Underwood and Sheldon Moss turn up defensively against the Spurs, but I need Pablo, Xander, and Sheldon to get more buckets, and for the starting 5 to give it their all every game if the Lakers are going to get past the Spurs. So with that being said, we've wrapped up the Western Conference series. So now let's move over to the East. The Knicks have been the most dominant team in the FBL with a record of 63-19, whereas the 76ers finished the season with 46-36, which to me doesn't make any sense. And I say this because I truly believe that the 76ers should have been the dominant team in the East and maybe in the FBL because of the roster. Now, I'm not going to belabor my position as to why I feel that way. I would highly recommend that you check out the 76ers team spotlight video in the FBL creation playlist. This way, you'll be able to understand why I was confused about the 76ers performance this season, so the links to that playlist will be in the description down below. With that being said, I didn't know what to expect, but I was hoping that this series would be a great one given the fact that we have 2 All-Star and All-FBL team players on the Knicks who have been dominant the entire season, and we have the 76ers who have 6 80-plus overall players on the team, which includes Shannon Tarsuski, who is also an All-Star. So enough of the talking, let's just jump into the first quarter. Now, out the gate, Angel Reed started off the game quickly by scoring 2 points over Quinn Lai. Soon after, Theo Payne taught Wesley Law a thing or two about guarding him in the post by hitting a hook shot over both him and Ralph Holloway, which you don't see too often. But then, what I found weird on the next play is that Shea Honeycutt chose to take a jump shot instead of catching a body, and on top of that, he missed the shot. But Theo was able to get that board and the putback. Angel Reed clapped back immediately, hitting Randall Cameron in the pocket with a no-look pass and one. Randall was always attacking the rim for high-efficiency shots throughout the game, and the same could be said about the Knicks, mainly Shea Honeycutt and Theo Payne. Here, Shake felt he had a baby on him and backed down Angel Reed for an easy 2 points in the paint. I have no idea why Angel was on Shake instead of Wesley Law, but we saw the end result. And with under 8 minutes left in the first, Wesley Law showed that he can create plays for himself after losing Xavier Pack with both off-the-ball movement and on-the-ball sauce to finish with a mean green floater over Theo Payne for 2 points. But on this next play, fam, you can clearly see why Shake Honeycutt is a problem. Quinn Lai missed a 20-footer for which Shake not only got the board, but made a tough shot over Randall Cameron. And right after, Theo let Angel Reed know not to come in his paint with a nice block. Angel took that personally and made his presence felt with the standard Kobe dunk. If you didn't know, Angel's based on Kobe with some changes based on the randomizer I used, and if you're looking to geek out on it, I highly suggest that you check out the FBL creation playlist. But here we have Wesley Law with a tough layoff of the fast break to bring the game to within 1 point. This first quarter was extremely fun to watch because of the back and forth action and the adjustments being made on both sides. The 76ers tried to double up Ayo Shakura, but Shake Honeycutt is back at it again, scoring 2 in the paint. And I couldn't help but wonder if the 76ers had chemistry issues, because the paint defense was a little too sweet if you ask me, but hey, clearly I was wrong. Look at that nice defensive stop by Randall Cameron, as well as the alley-oop from Angel Reed. Hey! Defensively, the 76ers need to work on that paint defense, but offensively, them boys are like that. This is definitely going down in the books as one of the top plays for the season. Now, a minute later, this play reinforces what I was saying about the 76ers defense. There was very little communication on the pick and roll, no switching, to where Ayo was easily able to hit a floater for 2. And after a quick timeout, the Knicks came back again in full force, abusing the pick and roll, leaving Anthony Wilson wide open to slam it down in the paint for 2 points. And at this point, the second string came in and we got to see some better defense from the 76ers, like here, when Gabriel Craig denied Bradley G's shot in the paint. This was quickly followed by Gabriel Craig dishing it out to Shannon Tarsuski, who shoots a mean green from 3. 76ers were now only down by 2, 18-20. And with under 2 minutes left in the quarter, Gabriel Craig was teaching Bradley G not to sleep on his range. With some shifty moves, Gabriel created space needed to hit a shot from beyond the arc, and it wasn't green, but it was still a mean shot. The game was now tied at 21, and I must say, Bradley G was struggling against Gabriel on both sides of the ball. But Bradley quickly paid him back, ripping the ball from Gabriel's pockets and throwing a dot to Dexter Jamison, who finished at the rim with ease. Dexter was spotty in this game, but when it comes to fast breaks and dunks, that's his forte. And in the last seconds of the quarter, Roderick Henderson lost Anthony Wilson on a hezzy to hit a jump shot to tie the game at 23. The 76ers then go on to take the lead at the end of the quarter after Anthony Wilson fouled Dean Pearson. Fast forward to the fourth quarter, the Knicks were down 95-85 after losing the second and third. And the way Anthony Wilson just froze on this play was pretty sad. It was as if the Knicks lost sight of what they were trying to accomplish. So, to make up for that blunder, Anthony Wilson made some moves to make space away from Wesley Law for a quick 2 points. And moments later, Wesley Law fired right back, hitting Quinn Lai with a nice spin move to get by him and to finish with an easy layup. At this point, I thought the Knicks were getting momentum, but then they started to get sloppy. Dexter didn't bother to cover the ball and got stripped by Ralph Holloway. Fortunately, the 76ers didn't score, but then Dexter Jamison took the right shot and didn't make it. Theo Payne was able to get the board, but ended up passing the ball onto Randall Cameron's foot, which led to another turnover. Yet and still, the 76ers didn't convert, but that was 2 lost opportunities for the Knicks to decrease the deficit. Now, Shake Honeycutt, though, he's a problem when he turns up. Anthony Wilson hit Shake with a nice alley. Knicks were still down by 10, though. With under 2 minutes left, Ralph Holloway passed the rock to Wesley Law, who quickly got doubled up. Seeing this, Wesley showed the Knicks that they too can throw alley-oops, throwing a nice lob to Ralph Holloway to expand the 76ers lead. Now, the Knicks didn't show much urgency to get back into the game, but at the same time, they don't really have any shooters. The majority of the team has to score within 9 to 12 feet from the rim. Case in point, don't get me wrong, this was a tough make for Xavier, but if he missed, their situation would have been much worse. Similarly, the Knicks defense was AWOL. Randall had an easy lean to the rim for a quick 2 points. I must say that Xavier Pack fought until the last buzzer. From the jump, he was calling for the rock from AO, but AO was slow on the take. With Wesley Law guarding him, Xavier attacked as if he was driving towards the rim and hit Wesley with a mean spin move towards his weak side for another 2 points. Now at this point, Wesley Law was tight. You're probably thinking, how would you know that? Just peep how Wesley sauced, and I mean sauced Quinn Lai up with a spin move, cross, and layup at the rack as a way of taunting Xavier Pack. This sequence was so clean that I just had to include it in the preview that I posted a while back. Nice bucket. Xavier Pack pretty much saw that and was like, say less. Called for the rock on the right elbow with Wesley Law guarding him again. That boy Xavier hit Wesley with another spin move, but this time to Wesley's left to hit the layup for another 2 points. Oof. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough for the Knicks to get back into the game. The 76ers take game 1 in the Garden, 105-95. Now, I hope you see why I say Shake is a problem. He had 29 points, 23 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks on 59% shooting. Theo Payne had 11 boards, 10 rebounds, 2-2-2 on 50% shooting, but he almost fouled out, which might explain why he wasn't protecting the paint as he normally would. Anthony Wilson was someone I was considering for the Pelicans earlier in the season since he wanted out of New York. He had 11 points on 38% shooting, followed by Xavier Pack, who had 10 points on 50% shooting. Now, when I saw Logan Willis's name on the box score, I was a bit taken aback. After some digging, I learned that Imani Ulis was injured, so Logan was getting more minutes than he normally would. Logan had 10 points, 6 boards, 5 assists on 42% shooting from the 5 position, which ain't that bad for a rookie. Another thing that stood out was Quinn Lai's poor contribution with 8% shooting for the night. I truly believe that this game could have gone either way if the Knicks played better defense, but if folks like Ayo Shakur and Quinn Lai made more of their shots, especially Quinn, the outcome of this game might have been way different. Now, we got a little glimpse of what Wesley Law is capable of during this game, during which he had 20 points, 5 boards, 6 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks on 54% shooting. But Randall Cameron, he had 17, 5, 8, and 3 on 58% shooting, and I would say he's been performing really well since coming back from his injury. Then we have Dean Pearson, who also had 17 points with 6 boards, 4 assists, and 2 steals on 50% shooting, followed by Ralph Holloway, who shot 60% from the field with 15 points, 2, 3, and 2. But then Shannon Tarsuski had a poor game by his standards, shooting 33% from the field, but that may be tied to the adjustment that the 76ers had to make. If you notice, Shannon played for 43 minutes, which is abnormally high, but right below him, you'll see that Angel Reed had 24 minutes with 8, 4, and 4. Turns out that Angel got injured during this game with an ankle sprain, and he'd be out for 4 to 6 weeks, which meant that if he would come back, it wouldn't be until the semis if the 76ers made it that far. Thus, Shannon took on more of the freight, and nonetheless, he had 12 points, 8 boards, 8 assists, and 4 steals, but he shot 20% from the 3, which isn't like him at all. But overall, this game delivered with some great highlights. Let's get into Game 2. Now, Game 2 was very similar to Game 1, with the 76ers winning by 13 to take both games in New York and lead the series. Now, from a scoring perspective, there were slight differences between Game 1 and Game 2 for the Knicks. Although Shea Honeycutt and Theo Payne performed as they normally do, this time around, Theo led the team in scoring with 27 points, 14 boards, 4 assists, and 3 blocks on 58% shooting. Now, during the season, Theo averaged 27, 19, 3, and 4 against the 76ers on 51% shooting, so this go around, I would say he was a little bit more efficient. Now, when it comes to Shea Honeycutt, he had 21 points and 13 boards with 2, 2, and 2, but his shooting took a dip this time with 36%. Bradley G had a much better game this time around with 13 points on 45% shooting. Quinn Lai also had a much better game with 12 points, but then we have the Rook, Logan Willis, who continued to contribute with almost a double-double. He had 12 points, 8 boards, 1 steal, and a block, but 4 turnovers, which isn't a good look. Now, Xavier's points fell a bit during this game, but he was perfect from the field as well as the line. And so, given the seeming mismatch between Xavier Pak as well as Wesley Law on the interior in the Game 1, I think Xavier should have gotten more touches compared to Bradley G, Quinn Lai, and Ayo Shakur, but I'm not the coach. As for the 76ers, Wesley Law dominated again, leading the pack with 24 points, 8 assists, 2 steals, and a block, shooting 10 for 16. Shannon Tarsuski had a much better game this time around, almost doubling his scoring with 22 points, 9 boards, and 6 assists. Ralph Holloway had an 18-point double-double and 62% shooting, which was on par to the 15 and 60% in Game 1. Randall Cameron also had a double-double with 16 points, 11 boards, 6 assists, and 2 steals on 6 for 14 shooting. But Dean Pearson fell off a bit in scoring this time around, but he still had a solid stat line with 13 points, 4 boards, 6 assists, 3 steals, a block on 50% shooting. And then Reed Rose, who we last saw, I think it was episode 14, he picked things up a bit, almost achieving a double-double with 13 points, 9 boards, 2 assists, 1 steal, and 1 block on 75% shooting. Sheesh. And I just noticed that Gabriel got a lot of minutes with Angel now out, but he only had 7 points on 50% shooting. Given all those minutes and running with the second string, I figured he'd do more with the opportunity, but unfortunately, that was not the case. So let's check out what happened in Game 3. Now, considering that the Knicks lost both Games 1 and 2, I figured I'd simulate each of the games unless something drastic happened, like the series being tied at 2 or 3. So I completely disregarded this game as one to watch, but boy, was I mistaken. I wish I would have watched this game because it looked intense with the Knicks winning in overtime in Philly. The Knicks had a 7-point lead at the half and completely fumbled the bag in the third, losing it by 15. However, they were able to rally in the fourth to push the game into overtime where they won by 4 points. I'm mad salty we didn't get to see this good gameplay here, but that's on me. Now, not for a lack of trying, Shannon performed even better this time around with 30, 9, 8, and 3 blocks on 58% shooting, followed by Randall Cameron, who had 27, 6, and 7 on 53% shooting. Finally, Gabriel Craig seized the opportunity he got and scored 22 points in 34 minutes with 5 assists on 54% shooting, but he almost fouled out, so we got to take the pluses with the minuses. Ralph Holloway, he had another 18-point game and literally almost had the same stat line in Game 2, where he had 2 boards and 10 assists while shooting 6 for 14. Wesley Law scored 12 points less in this game, but he had 4 boards, 6 assists, 3 steals, and 1 block. Dean Pearson stayed on par with his production from the previous game with 12 points and 3 assists. Roderick Henderson's contribution kind of mirrored Game 2, but Reed Rose's scoring fell a little from 13 points and 9 boards to 6 and 5. Similarly, Clarence Booker let me down with 0 contributions to the team. At the very least, he had 3 points in the last game. This time around, there was nothing from Clarence that could be deemed impactful, which is probably why the 76ers lost this game. Now on the Knicks side, Shake and Theo were dominant yet again, both with double-doubles, but Shake scored the most, although I think Theo was the most impactful. Shake had 30, 15, and 2 on 60% shooting, whereas Theo had a crazy stat line of 26, 11, 5, 2, and 3 with unfortunately 4 turnovers, and he fouled out. Imagine if he didn't. Bradley G performed even better with 19 points, 5 boards, and 2 blocks with a little over 50% of shooting. Anthony Wilson doubled his scoring with Quinn Lai, also improving his scoring by 17 points, or with 17 points, excuse me. Then we have Xavier Pack, not Pac, like I said in the last game, and Logan Willis, who came close to double-doubles with Xavier scoring 10 and getting 8 boards and 5 assists, whereas Logan had 8 points and 12 boards. Then we have Dexter and Ayo, who maintained the same level of contribution as in Game 3. Overall, the Knicks bench outscored the 76ers bench by 26 points, which is what I believe helped the Knicks get back into the game in the fourth, but the Knicks also had 17 turnovers compared to the 76ers' 10. Clarence may have been able to change the tide of the game if he contributed, which is tough because I low-key am rooting for him to do better. The Knicks ended up keeping their playoff run alive with this much-needed win, and in Game 4, they completely fumbled the bag. The 76ers ended up winning the second game in Philly by 12 points, with the shooting splits very similar between the two teams, with the Knicks hitting 54 out of 89 shots and the 76ers hitting 55 out of 92 shots. I'd say the differentiating factor between the two teams was the fact that the Knicks only hit 8 threes compared to the 76ers, who hit 18 threes. Another note is that the Knicks bench continued to outscore the 76ers bench, this time by 22 points, but the Knicks had 22 turnovers compared to the 76ers' 11, indicating that the 76ers were defensively locked in this game compared to the last. Shannon Tarsuski continued to earn the player of the game with 34 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, and 2 steals on 80% shooting. He absolutely torched the Knicks from beyond the arc, hitting 6 out of 8 shots. Wesley Law had another great game with 27 points, 2 boards, 8 assists, and 2 steals on 12 for 17 shooting, but he was in foul trouble with 4 fouls. Then we have Randall Cameron, who had 24 points, 8 assists, and 3 steals, shooting 9 for 17. Dean Pearson is the only Sixer that had a double-double this time with 17 points, 10 assists, and 3 steals. Ralph Holloway shot 67% from the field with 16 points, 7 assists, and 3 steals. Now, I don't say much about Roderick Henderson, but I must admit that he is a very consistent role player. Up until this point in the series, Roderick had 7 points, 2 boards, and 1 assist on 44% shooting as an average, compared to Gabriel, Clarence, and Reed, who were all over the place. At the very least, everyone on the 76ers contributed offensively, even though there were less players that had double-digit points in this game. Although the same could be said about the Knicks, the scoring breakdown was a lot different compared to the other games in the series thus far. For example, Theo, as we saw, has been at the top 2 for the Knicks scoring consistently, and in this game he scored 34 points compared to 26 in Game 3. He also had 11 boards, 5 assists, 1 steal, and 3 blocks on 71% shooting. However, Dexter Jameson was the second highest scorer this time around, followed by Shake Honeycutt. Dexter jumped from 6 points in Game 3 to 20 points with 5 boards and 4 assists on damn near perfect shooting. Now Shake, he dropped drastically from 30 points to 17, but he still had 12 boards on 62% shooting. The Rook, Logan Willis, had 16 points, 2 boards, and 2 assists on 67% shooting. And this was followed by Xavier Pack, who had 15 on 78% shooting. Now Anthony Wilson, he had a solid game as well, although he had some poor shooting splits. Similarly, Bradley G, his points dropped by 7, but his efficiency improved from 55% to 71%. And I would say that Shake, up until this point, he was averaging 27 points, but then he also averaged 41 minutes per game. So considering that his minutes were decreasing each game with Theo picking up the slack, I could only assume that Shake was fatigued by this point, which is why his production decreased during this game. So with the series now 3-1, the Knicks would need a Hail Mary to be able to get back into the series. Unfortunately, it wasn't a miracle that the Knicks received. Unlike the Spurs, who had a player come back and change the course of the series in a positive way, the Knicks had a player come back who essentially made matters worse. As you can see, the Knicks got served in Game 5. This is one of the biggest upsets in Round 1, only second to the Pelicans beating the Warriors. The Knicks kept this close and were only down by 4 heading into the fourth, but then the team caved, only scoring 16 points in the fourth to lose by 15. Outside of Theo Payne and Shake Honeycutt, most of the team was very inconsistent. This game, Shake and Theo practically swapped in scoring, with Shake scoring 30 and Theo scoring 18. Although Theo had a double-double, he made 7 less shots compared to Game 4. Xavier Pack, who isn't known to be a high scorer, had 11 points, which is about what he averaged on the season, but his efficiency was worse compared to Game 4. Anthony Wilson had the standard 11 with 5 boards and 1 block on 50% shooting. Quinn Lai upped his game from Game 4 to score 9 points on 40% shooting. But then comes the albatross for the Knicks in Imani Ulis. As the word of the game, albatross is the source of frustration or guilt. In this case, both for me and probably the Knicks. You see, Imani Ulis got injured towards the end of the regular season, but was finally ready to play for Game 5. The coach literally gave Logan 0 minutes and in return got 6 points on 40% shooting from Imani. This boggled my mind because Logan, who was consistently in the top 5 in scoring for the Knicks with the exception of Game 3, his production was pretty solid for only having played 74 minutes during the regular season to then get 76 minutes in the playoffs. Naturally, you should be thinking, why should I care about this rookie? Well, a few episodes ago, I mentioned that I wanted Logan for the Pelicans to support Stephen Lee either as a backup center or at the 5 replacing Casey Starks and have Stephen at the 4. Now, at the beginning of the season, Logan only had a 68 overall and was sent down to the G League. He quickly progressed to a 74 overall in one season and has been solid ever since. Now, I'd say he's kind of like a Jordan Poole from a progression and impact perspective, and looking at the box scores, 3 out of the 4 games in which Logan played, he was able to be impactful both ways, 5th in scoring for the team with decent splits compared to the seasoned vets. And yet, he was benched for one of the most important games in the series. So to me, this was foolish, which is probably what messed up the team chemistry and ultimately what drove the Knicks to actually lose this game. Now, Game 5 seemed a bit wild for both teams, with Dean Pearson leading the team in scoring with 19 points, 9 boards, and 2 steals, followed by, which is what is weird, Clarence Booker, who had 17 points on perfect shooting. I'll let that sit in for a second. But then we have Ralph Holloway, who had 16 again in Game 5 with 6 assists and 2 steals on 50% shooting, followed by Shannon Tarsuski, whose scoring dropped from 34 down to 14 with 7 boards, 10 assists, and 3 steals. Wesley Law also dropped in scoring from 27 points to 12 with a solid 4 boards, 5 assists, a steal, and 2 blocks. And this was Randall's lowest scoring in the series with 12 points, 6 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals, and 1 board. But he, like Wesley and Gabriel, were all in foul trouble. But then we have Gabriel, Reed Rose, Roderick Henderson. They were all able to contribute to this win. However, Roderick injured his shoulder, which has him projected to fully recover by the conference finals. We'll have to see if this will play a factor against the next team that they face. But overall, the way the 76ers played against the best team in the league in regards to wins and losses reinforces why I thought the 76ers would be the team to beat out east. Even with Adriel Reed out since the first game, the 76ers had enough depth on both sides of the ball to cause a lot of noise for anyone they go up against. For the next series, we have the 4th seed and offensive Charlotte Hornets led by Hendrix Cobb, the FBL leader in scoring, versus the 5th seed and defensive Atlanta Hawks led by the DPOY Aaron Lawrence. Let's dive into Game 1. So in the first play, Hendrix Cobb started off the game with a lot of off-the-ball movement to lose Yancey Maker and to create some space for a layup within the paint after a nice dish from Felipe Lopez. A few moments later, Aaron Lawrence did the exact same thing with the feed from Rudolph Farrell to end the play with a 2-handed dunk. And after a few defensive stops and poor shots from the Hornets, the Hawks used the pick and roll to freeze Bob Montgomery and give Aaron the space he needed to finish at the rim. Now, early in the first, there were some indications that the Hornets would be struggling offensively, mainly because Marion Goodrich couldn't make any of his shots. But fortunately for him, there were 3 other players that were over 6'10" on the court who could help get a second chance points. And on several occasions, Marion missed shots with Bob cleaning up the mess. And within the first 5 minutes of the game, Marion was already cold. And on top of that, the Hornets' perimeter defense is weak, which Clark Bryant exploits after setting a nice screen for Yancey Maker. Clark saw an opening and popped out, losing Marion Goodrich to hit a 3-point shot from beyond the arc and to help the Hawks take a 3-point lead. And I will say that the Hawks often let players develop a good ball movement to take the best shot rather than the first available one. But a few moments later, Marion Goodrich tried to showboat a little, thinking he could sauce up Yancey Maker, which he did, but he was immediately denied by Rudolph Farrell. And yet again, Bob Montgomery was there to clean up the mess and score, Hawks were down by 1. Now on this play, the Hawks highlight what I was saying about the ball movement again, as well as off the ball movement from the team. After 3 passes, Shane Hicks created space for a shot from the free throw line to increase the Hawks' lead by 3. Shane caught Radoslav Zagorac slipping and exposed him. And then on the next play, Hendricks finally got his number called and drove towards the rim for a tough lay. I can't hold you. It seemed as if Marion was hating because he stalled in passing the rock to Hendricks after several people told him to pass the rock. In fact, Hendricks barely touched the rock in the first quarter overall. The game was still close with under 7 minutes left in the quarter. And Shane Hicks yet again was making Radoslav suffer by losing him again to hit a shot from beyond the arc right in his face. Hawks now with a 4-point lead. People sleep on the 6'11" small forward, but on the season, Shane averaged 42% from beyond the arc on 240 attempts. Now fast forward a bit, and the Hornets were now down by 6 with the second string on the court. Deontay Walker put the moves on Yancey Maker to create the space for a mid-range shot, which he did several times during the first quarter. But this didn't faze the Hawks because it seemed as if they had better communication and better chemistry than the Hornets. First, with Yancey feeding Julian Bush at the right moment for 2 points in the paint, soon followed by a big stop from Julian to draw a foul, which you can see right here where we have Julian pressing Bill Patterson, rejecting a shot only to get pushed down to the ground by Bill. In episode 16, I noted Geno Ingles for what he was able to accomplish against Eli Harris and the Houston Rockets, and here he shows exactly why I did. Geno shows no fear against taller defenders and is willing to attack the rim for 2 points. Sure, this is risky given the fact that he's only 6'2" compared to the 3 players that were taller than 6'9", but Geno has the speed to get around defenders and is shifty enough to create the space he needs to make plays, as you can see here, with him finishing with a nice euro. Oof. Now jumping into the fourth, the Hornets were down by 9 with under 5 minutes left in regulation. Yet again, Marion Goodrich took a poor shot that Bill Patterson got the board for. But while attempting the second chance shot, he's fouled by Rudolph Farrell, who gets his 6th personal and is now out of the game. But despite this, the Hawks stayed both focused and aggressive. Clark Bryant sized up Marion Goodrich, called him a baby, and shot a mid-range over him, expanding their lead to 9 points. Now continuing to apply pressure, the Hawks aggressively attacked the rim. Aaron Lawrence missed the layup in the paint, which Shane Hicks recovered. Now moving out to 21 feet, Shane passed the rock to a now wide open Aaron, who hit a long mid-range shot. The score is now 100-89. Now, after failing to score, the Hawks continued to exploit the Hornets' poor defense and scored another 2 off of the fast break. Shane and Aaron go well like icing on cake. The Hornets could not stop the 2 when they were in sync. Now, with under 2 minutes left, the Hornets could mount a comeback if they 1. Used their sharpshooter in Hendricks Cobb, 2. Got defensive stops, and 3. Converted those stops into points, but not when folks like Radoslav Zagorac are taking good shots, but missing them, but fortunately, Bill Patterson was there to get the putback done. Now, I don't know if you peeped this, but Hendrick was also wide open on the perimeter, but Marion chose to pass the rock to the 38% shooter versus the 45% shooter from beyond the arc. On top of that, the Hornets' paint defense was sweet. Aaron was doing whatever he wanted out there. Fast forward, and the coach ran the same play for Radoslav, who missed again, but this time Bill Patterson was denied by Julian Bush, who also recovered the ball. And in case you were wondering, yes, Hendricks was wide open beyond the arc again. Now, the Hawks slowed down the tempo a bit, seeing that the Hornets were trying to quickly add points to the board, and Julian off the pick and roll had an open lane to the basket. Hendricks Cobb saw this and tried to contest, only to get postered, and won. Julian ended up making the free throw shot, and at this point the game was out of reach for the Hornets, and the Hawks end up taking game 1 in Charlotte, beating the Hornets 108-93. The Hornets were absolutely terrible from beyond the arc, only hitting 4 out of 25 shots, and in total missed 10 more shots than the Hawks did. But they were able to stay in the game with the number of attempts they were able to get at the free throw line, resulting in 25 of their 93 points from the line. The fact that the Hornets lived by the 3 and died by the 3 might be the reason why they lost by 15 in Charlotte, but it wasn't because Hendricks Cobb didn't do enough. Although, in my opinion, Marion Goodrich was hating, Hendricks had 32 points, 2 boards, and 2 assists on 59% shooting. But the 33% shooting from 3 didn't help the Hornets' cause. Deontay Walker was torching the Hawks from the mid-range, and I know we only saw one clip from that game where he did that, but he was definitely doing it multiple times throughout the game. But on top of that, he was very terrible from the line, only shooting 2 for 6. He ended up with 13 points, 3 boards, 1 assist, and 1 steal. Now, I will say that the gap in points scored between Hendricks and Deontay says a lot. A 21-point differential means that without Hendricks, the team would have been worse off, which isn't normal. On average, during the season, the Hornets scored 111 points with 46% shooting, but in this game, they only shot 37% from the field, which is a testament to the Hawks defense. Now moving on, next is Geno Ingles, who had 12 points, 3 boards, and 1 assist on 45% shooting, and during the season, he averaged 5, 1, and 2, but against the Hawks, it was much less with 4, 1, and 1, so I'd say this was a decent performance from Geno. Now as the backup one, he should work on his playmaking to alleviate the pressure that Hendricks has to deal with a lot of times, especially if he's looking to become a starter next season for whatever team he may go to, since every player in this league will be a free agent at the end of the season. Now, Bill Patterson, he had a double-double with 10 and 12 as well as 5 assists. He definitely saved Marion Goodrich a lot from his poor shooting, but it certainly wasn't enough to get the Hornets back in the game. Bob Montgomery did well, I suppose, with 8 points and 7 boards on 50% shooting, but as a second 7-foot-tall player on the team, I would expect him to be more on par with Bill Patterson, considering he had more minutes. Then we have Marion Goodrich, who shot 1 for 15 with 6 points, 3 of which came from the line, followed by Radoslav Zagorac, who shot 1 for 11 with 5 points, 3 of which came from the line. So I would say these two gents were part of the contributing factor as to why the Hornets didn't do as well as they possibly could. Now, I know it's wrong to find the quote-unquote reason for a loss, but am I wrong for thinking that these two were the driving force behind it? You let me know down in the comments. The DPOY Aaron Lawrence led the way for the Hawks with 22 points, 8 boards, 8 assists, and 4 steals on 50% shooting, which was on par with how he typically plays against the Hornets. This was followed by the 23rd overall pick, Clark Bryant, who had 17, 5, and 3 on 47% shooting, and his game was also on par with his average of 17, 2, and 2 for the season. Now, the same could be said for Tyler Yu, who had 14 points on 38% shooting during the game and had 15 points and 41% shooting on the season. But then when you look at the point dispersion between the Hawks and the Hornets, you could see why the performances were very different between the two teams. So after Tyler, we then had Julian Bush, who had 12 points, 12 boards, nice double-double for him, but he was in foul trouble, only second to Rudolph Farrell, who we saw foul out with 6 fouls. Julian also tied for the most blocks in the game, tying Shane Hicks with 3 blocks. Shane had 10 points, 7 boards, 6 assists, and a steal. Then we have Rudolph Farrell, Yancey Maker, D'Angelo Roy, Dexter Burke, and Casey Conley, who all ended up contributing to this win. So even Casey Conley, who only had 1 minute in this game, he made sure to take advantage of the opportunity and found a way to score on the Hornets, which says a lot about the Hornets defense. But nonetheless, the Hornets would definitely need to step up their defense if they were going to bounce back in game 2. But unfortunately, that did not happen this time around. In fact, not only did the Hornets only score 2 more points compared to game 1, but they also let the Hawks score 5 more points than they did in game 1. The shooting overall was very similar this game, with the Hornets and the Hawks hitting 43% of their shots, but the Hawks hit 43% of their threes for a total of 15 compared to the Hornets, who hit 28% for 8 of their threes. The saving grace for the Hornets was the fact that their bench outscored the Hawks bench by 13, which was led by Antoine Rojo, but the team as a whole gave those points away at the line, with the Hawks earning 22 points from the line compared to the Hornets, who only had 13 from the line. And on top of that, the point differential between the Hornets was the same in this game as it was for game 1, with Hendricks Cobb leading the team. He had 32 points, 8 boards, which is wild for him since he plays the 1 and he has a 36 offense and a 53 defense rebound attribute. I will say that it seems as if Hendricks was real stingy with the rock, only getting 1 assist, and he took the majority of the 3-point shots, hitting 31% out of 16. Oddly enough, he averaged 12 attempts from beyond the arc, so this really isn't unusual per se. He's just usually more efficient with the shot. But with the 15-point differential, Antoine Rojo was the second highest scorer with 17 points, 7 boards, and 2 assists on 47% shooting. Then there was another drop in scoring, with Bill Patterson scoring 9 points, 6 boards, and 4 assists on 50% shooting, followed by Felipe, who performed way better this time around with 8 points, 3 boards, and 7 assists. In fact, he was facilitating more than Hendricks Cobb, which says a lot as to why the Hornets performed the way they did. And although Radoslav, Marian, Yante, Geno, Bob, and Max Burns contributed, there's still much to be desired from an efficiency perspective, especially when you look at how bad Marian shot the ball as well as Yante Walker. This just was not going to cut it. The team would need to take better shots and defend the perimeter better if they expected to get back into the series. As for the Hawks, Aaron Lawrence led the team again with close to a 29-point triple-double. He also had 12 boards, 8 assists, and 2 blocks, shooting 10 for 22. This was followed by Clark Bryant, who scored more this time than in Game 1 with 23 points, 4 boards, 1 assist, and 1 steal on 39% shooting. This was also followed by Tyler Yu, who performed better than he did in Game 1 with 21 points, 2 boards, 4 assists, and a steal on 57% shooting. Then we also have Shane Hicks, who performed better with 13 points, 5 boards, and 3 assists. And then Yancey Maker, he also doubled his scoring with even worse shooting, unfortunately, but he was able to get the line more than he did in Game 1, followed by Rudolph Farrell, who was more disciplined this time around with only 1 foul on the game, but with a 10-point double-double, getting 10 boards, 6 assists, and 2 steals. Now, having lost both games at home, it would be a stretch for the Hornets to change the momentum of this series, but let's dive into Game 3 to see how things panned out. And oh boy, the Hawks were able to eke out a win against the Hornets to bring the series to 3-0, although the Hornets did have more fight this time around. After being down 16 at the half, the Hornets fought back in the second half only to lose by 2 points. The shooting between the two teams was very close this time around, with the Hornets making 50% of their shots compared to the Hawks, who had 46% of their shots. But the game changer this time around was that the Hornets hit 50% of their threes for a total of 13 compared to the Hawks, who only hit 8. However, the Hornets gave up 24 points at the line compared to the Hawks, who only gave up 15. And if it weren't for this, the Hornets might have won the game since their bench outscored the Hawks bench by 12 points. Now, looking at the box score for the Hawks, you could see that Aaron Lawrence and Clark Bryant continued to lead the team in scoring, with Aaron having an insane game. He had 27 points, 8 boards, 6 assists, 6 steals, and a block, shooting 64% from the field and 73% from the line. Clark himself, he had 22, 2, and 2 on 47% shooting, but he shot terribly from beyond the arc. And then after Clark, you'll see that there's a big drop in points from the Hawks compared to the previous game, with Yancey scoring 11 points on 50% shooting, followed by Rudolph Farrell, who didn't get a double-double this time around, but he came close with 11 points, 7 boards, and 5 assists. Tyler Yu himself fell a bit in scoring during Game 3 with 11 points, 4 assists, having taken 4 less shots from the field. Julian Bush performed a little better this time around with 7 points, 11 boards with 1, 1, and 1. And then Shane Hicks dropped off substantially in scoring compared to Game 2, only having scored 5 points. So between his drop as well as Tyler's drop, the Hawks came really close to selling this game, but fortunately, they were able to eke it out with 2 points. As for the Hornets, we finally got a good game this time around from Hendrix Cobb. Sure, he didn't have 30 points, but he got the team more involved and played a role on defense. Hendrix still shot poorly from beyond the arc, but the 21 points, 4 boards, 5 assists, and 3 steals had a huge impact on the team. Followed by Hendrix, we have Marion Goodrich, who tripled his points this game with 4 boards and 7 assists on 60% shooting. And Radoslav Zagorac, he doubled his points also on 60% shooting. Then we have Geno Ingles, who tripled his points on 60% shooting, with Deontay Walker doubling his as well. And then we have Felipe, who did well in Game 1. His performance has been consistent with Game 2 as well, but with more rebounds, steals, and a block on 50% shooting. Then we have Bill Patterson, who fell a bit scoring-wise, but Antoine Rojo put up a stinker. Jeez, shooting 2 for 7 and only getting 5 points compared to the previous game. And so overall, I guess with Hendrix dishing out the ball around to his teammates more, this played a huge factor in the Hornets' performance. Let's see if they continue this into Game 4. I thought the series would be over with in Atlanta, but the Hornets surprised me by beating the Hawks 91-84. Now, it would still be a stretch for the Hornets to perform a reverse sweep, but the fact that they kept the Hawks to under 90 points was incredible. Now, both teams were fairly even, with the Hornets making 33 out of 77 shots and the Hawks making 30 out of 85. But the Hawks made 3 more threes compared to the Hornets, and the Hornets had 4 more points from the line. Some other key differentiators in this win was that the Hornets bench scored 12 more points than the Hawks bench, and they also had 4 more second chance points and 14 more points in the paint. So ultimately, I think this was one of the lowest scoring games out of the entire series. So kudos to the Charlotte Hornets for actually getting a win. But now let's get into the box scores. One of the biggest differences between Game 4 and the other games in this series thus far is that Aaron Lawrence didn't lead the team in scoring. In fact, one might argue that he took the night off, scoring only 13 points, with a large portion coming from the line, but he did in fact have 13 boards and 8 assists. On top of that, the 30% shooting was his lowest thus far in the series, which reinforces why I believe he took the night off. But nonetheless, Clark Bryant maintained the momentum he had all series with 19 points and 3 assists, but just as with Aaron, he struggled with controlling and protecting the ball. Rudolph Farrell scored the most he's ever scored this series thus far, with 15 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, 3 steals, and a block. And Tyler Yu also continued with the same level of contribution as he had in games 1 and 3. But Shane Hicks lacked discipline this game, and he ended up fouling out with 10 points and 6 assists. And then Yancey Maker dropped off a bit, only scoring 5 points and shooting 17% from the field, sheesh, and 20% from 3, goodness, which was a big stinker if you ask me. And at the bottom of the list, Julian Bush completely fell off, shooting 0 for 6 for the entire game. Julian getting 10 boards and not converting those into points definitely hurt the team. But let's take a look at the Hornets box score and see how they performed. Now with the Hornets, the trend continued with Hendricks spreading the ball around more this time around. He led the team with 19 points, 3 boards, 5 assists, and 2 steals, but he also gave up 6 turnovers. Hendricks' shooting splits were similar to Game 3, but he was only able to get to the line once. And then we have Radoslav Sagarac, who scored less than he did in Game 3, but was the second highest in scoring while being perfect from beyond the arc, which is a stark difference compared to what we saw in Game 1. Then we have Bill Patterson finally getting his act together with 12 points, 3 steals, and 2 blocks on 50% shooting, followed by Felipe Lopez, who I know I really don't talk about that often. I think he's around the 3rd or 4th 7-footer on the team. I do want to see him develop more. I think he could become a really good role player if he puts in the work and develops even further. But as it relates to this game, he increased his contribution by scoring 11 points and grabbing 7 boards. Then we have Antoine Rojo, who doubled his points in Game 4 to 11 with 4 boards, but Marion Goodrich dropped in points, although he led the team in assists. I would say that Marion is by far one of the most inconsistent on the team. On a great day, he can give you about 25 to 30 points and up to 10 assists, but on his bad days, boy, are those bad days really bad, like what we saw in Game 1. I think overall, the Hornets were able to take a game, but I question whether or not the Hornets were better defensively this time around, or was it just that the Hawks were sloppy and didn't close out the series as they should have. Game 5 would give me all the clarity that I needed. Now, in Game 5, the Hornets started off strong in the first and second quarters and kept things close up until the half. The game was pretty much lost in the third, only shooting 20% from beyond the arc. The Hornets went back to living by the 3. Don't get me wrong, the Hawks took the same number of shots as the Hornets did, but they made 13 shots compared to the Hornets' 5. In addition to this, the Hawks scoring 26 points from the line versus the Hornets, who had 19, really blew this game out of the water. And the biggest difference between Game 5 and Game 6 when it comes to the Hornets' performance is the fact that Hendricks Cobb fouled out in only 15 minutes of playtime. So, without Hendricks on the offense, we've already seen the Hornets struggling to create plays, take the right shots, and take effective shots. But surprisingly enough, Marion Goodrich accepted the challenge and went off with 28 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, 2 steals, shooting 53% from the field. And this reinforces what I was saying during Game 4, in that when he's on, he's really on. But when he's off, he's really off. But just like Hendricks, he too almost came close to fouling out of the game. After Marion, we have Radoslav Sagarac, who continued the momentum from the last game with an overall solid stat line. He had 15 points, 3 boards, 2 assists, and 3 steals on 55% shooting. And then Bob Montgomery was the only person on the team with a double-double at 14 points, 10 boards, 2 assists, 1 steal, and 4 blocks. And so after Bob, there was Bill Patterson, who came close to a double-double with 10 points and 8 boards with 1, 2, and 2. But Yontae Walker, man, he didn't capitalize on the opportunity that was available to him, and he put up another stinker shooting-wise, only making 2 out of 9 shots and 0 from the three-point line. So these contributing factors all together is why the Hornets ended up tanking the second half of this game to lose Game 5. But now looking at the Hawks box score, Clark Bryant came through again to lead the Hawks in this victory against the Hornets with 28 points and 53% shooting. This was followed by Tyler Yu, who doubled his scoring points this time with 26 points and 4 assists on 71% shooting, which included 5 shots from beyond the arc. Then we have Rudolph Farrell, who consistently has had double-digit points after Game 1, with 17 points, 8 boards, 4 assists, and 4 steals on 50% shooting. And I low-key was surprised at how consistent Rudolph is, and after some digging, I learned that he jumped from a 77 overall to an 80 over the course of the season. So here I thought I'd be able to scoop him up from one of my teams, mainly thinking about the Pelicans or the Mavs, but Rudolph's definitely going to try to get a bag in the offseason, so that might be dead in the water. Now, at first glance, I was going to give Yancey Makers some props for scoring 12 with 7 assists, but then I realized he only shot 25% from the field and had 6 points from the line, so Yancey was probably one of the reasons why Hendricks fouled out the game. But after Yancey, we have Shane Hicks, who had the same number of points as he did in Game 4, but he was actually able to grab 7 boards and had 6 assists. If Shane's interior defense was better, Shane would probably be a great candidate for the 4 or the 5, but I think he might be better suited for his current position at the 3 given his shooting abilities and his lack of interior defense. Now, Aaron Lawrence was pretty much like, yo, I'm done. Y'all can handle this team. He had another day off, hitting only 3 out of 13 shots. Fortunately for him, the rest of the team stepped up their game to close this series out. So let me know down in the comments if you want to see the 76ers in the Hawks series or answer the poll question in the community tab. I knew the series could have gone either way since the two teams were close in seeding. I low-key was hoping this series would go to Game 7, but unfortunately, the Hornets weren't clicking and the Hawks capitalized on this. So let's move on to the next series where we have G. Williams and the Chicago Bulls versus Omar Abdul-Rauf and the Milwaukee Bucks. I can't hold you, I wasn't looking forward to this series at all. In fact, in the regular season, the Bulls won this series against the Bucks 3-1. The last time we saw this matchup was in episode 11 when the Bucks lost 72-102. However, as we see here in the playoff bracket, that the Bucks were the 3 seed and the Bulls were the 6 seed. So little did I know that this series would be the best one in round 1 going all the way to Game 7. So let's get into it. Man, the Bulls started Game 1 slowly but quickly turned the table to dominate the remaining 3 quarters to take Game 1 by 15 in Milwaukee. Now, the shooting was comparable with the Bulls hitting 45 shots compared to the Bucks 46, of which the Bulls had 2 more 3-pointers, but the Bucks only had 1 shot from the free throw line, and that very shot was missed compared to the Bulls who made 15 shots from the line. So as you'll see shortly, the Bucks bench outscored the Bulls bench by 17, so literally, the Bucks lost this game by fouling too much and giving up too many free throws. Now, I can say that because everyone on the rotation had at least 1 foul, with Ricky Myers tallying 3 fouls. If you can only see my face right now and me shaking my head, yes, I'm invested, but don't judge because you'll start to see why shortly. And then looking at the individual production from the Bucks, I was flabbergasted to see that Omar Abdul-Rauf only had 4 points the entire game on 20% shooting, which is highly disappointing considering how he performed during the year. What's even crazier was that Ricky Perdue led the team in scoring and in a big way with 26 points and 4 assists on 56% shooting. So you're probably thinking, what is the big deal? Well, Ricky on the season averaged 10 points and 2 assists on 43% shooting, and specifically against the Bucks, he averaged 9 points and 2 assists on 52% shooting. So to me, this was an incredible outing, especially since he hit 6 3-point shots in the game compared to his regular season/career high of 4. This actually helped Ricky qualify for the 5th slot in the Bucks playoff record book for 3-pointers made in a playoff game. But moving on, we then have Mike Suarez, who was on the 2nd string, who had 13 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, 1 steal, and a block. He definitely outperformed compared to his averages against the Bulls, which is around 8 points, 6 boards, and 2 assists. Then we have Lawrence Peters, who is someone I came very close to picking up at the time I was looking to move Derek Gadsden from the Pelicans, and it's for this reason. Lawrence had 12 points, 5 boards, 2 assists, 1 steal, and 1 block, and he was definitely somebody I was hoping who could come off in the 2nd string just to provide more depth for the Pelicans. Now, after Lawrence, we have Shane Miles Jr., who had 11, 2, 4, and 2 on 50% shooting, followed by Kirk Miller, who I've highlighted a few times before. Kirk almost had a double-double with 10 points, 9 boards, and 4 assists on 50% shooting. But then the remaining starting 5 in Lionel Kellogg, J.D. Garrett, and Omar Abdul-Rauf collectively had 20 points, which is no wonder why the Bucks lost this game. Lionel on average scored 14 points over the regular season and had 11 against the Bulls. So this is a slight dip, but as the 2nd best player on the team, I would expect more from him. For JD, it was 8 and 7, which is on par with how he normally performed, but I still can't go over Omar's performance, especially during the regular season where he averaged 19 points and 19 boards against the Bulls specifically. But hopefully you can understand why I was a bit perturbed after seeing these scores. Now with the Bulls, I fully expected G. Williams and AJ West to dominate the scoring for the team. But it was to my surprise that Lance Biller led the team with 22 points, 4 boards, 8 assists, 2 steals, and 1 block on 47% shooting for the second string. And if you look closely, Lance had 12 points from beyond the arc. So back in episode 11, Lance torched the Bucks. So him hitting that many shots in a game isn't too surprising since his high on the season was 5 3-point shots. Then we have one of the 2 rookies on the team in Skylar Cash, who actually went undrafted. Skylar had 20 points and 11 boards with 5 assists on 64% shooting. I can see why coach swapped out Carson Shepard, the second overall pick in the 21st draft, for Skylar. But after Skylar, we have G. Williams, who had the same in points, 8 boards, 6 assists, and a steal on 56% shooting, which was close to a triple-double. After G, AJ West had 15, 5, and 8 with all of his points coming from beyond the arc, followed by Shannon Cage, who came close to a double-double with 12 points, 8 boards, 3 assists, and 5 blocks. Sheesh. Those 5 blocks helped Shannon earn the 5th slot for the most blocks in a playoff game to tie Joakim Noah. So with Game 1 on the books, it was time to move on to Game 2. And my, the pendulum swung to the other direction very quickly in this game, with the Bucks tying the series after a 38-point win against the Bulls. The Bucks were able to keep the Bulls to under 20 points for 2 out of the 4 quarters. And on top of that, the shooting percentages were a lot different this time around compared to Game 1, where the Bulls making 33 out of 89 shots compared to the Bucks, who made 48 out of 98 shots. And on top of that, the Bucks scored 60 points from beyond the arc compared to the 21 from the Bulls, which is insane. Now looking at the Bucks box score, Lawrence Peters almost tied his career high in points with 37 points, 4 boards, 2 steals, and 2 blocks on 67% shooting. And on top of that, Lawrence tied the second highest record for most 3-pointers made in a playoff game, tying Chris Middleton and Ray Allen with 7 shots made, so kudos to him. After Lawrence, there was a big drop of points between him and Shane Miles Jr., who had 13 points, 5 boards, and 4 assists on 50% shooting. But despite the gap in scoring, Shane performed better than he did in Game 1, so I can appreciate the consistency he provided during this game. After Shane, we have Lionel Kellogg, who contributed more here than he did in Game 1, with 13-point and 15 assist double-double, which included 7 steals on 40% shooting. And because of this, Lionel is now the 3rd in the Bucks record book for assists in a playoff game and 2nd for the most steals in a game after this performance, so big shout out to him as well. I would have liked to see more out of Lionel, but beggars can't be choosers since the Bucks actually won this game. After Lionel, we have Omar, who had a double-double this time, scoring over 10 points with 18 boards, but he had 4 turnovers, which just isn't going to cut it up against the Bulls. Now, following Omar, we have Mike Suarez, who had a solid game as well. Following the first game, he had 11 points, 6 boards, and 5 assists. But you know what bothers me the most about Mike? What really bothers me is that he has the ability to have 15 plus games, and by 15 plus I mean 15 points. And I know this because he did this over 20 times during the season. But maybe I'm asking too much of Mike since he is only a 70 overall, and in fact, he dropped 2 overall since the beginning of the season. But still, when you know somebody that has the ability to do something, you would like to see them actually perform and be the best that they can be. Anyway, outside of that, Ricky Perdue, yes, the same Ricky Perdue that had 20 points in the last game, had 11 points on 4 for 14 shooting this time around, and he was close to fouling out the game. So that big swing is kind of wild to me, but I shouldn't say it's wild because I was kind of surprised he scored that much in the first game to begin with. But nonetheless, fortunately for the Bucks, they were actually able to pull this out and get the win. As for the Bulls, Lance Baylor this time around had a terrible outing from a scoring perspective with only 5 points, but he was able to get some dimes, a steal, and a block. Thus, this created an opportunity for Rocky Chambers to step up with 15 points leading the way, so we can clearly see why the Bulls got mopped up. Now, Rocky did jump up 4 overalls over the course of the season, but he only averaged 7 points with a negative estimated wins added and an efficiency rating that falls under the 50th percentile of the team. So in my opinion, the team shouldn't have been relying on Rocky to lead the charge, but that's also evident in the shooting splits of the other players. For example, G. Williams had 13 points and 10 boards with 2, 2, and 1, but he had 4 turnovers, which didn't help the cause. AJ West, he had 13 on 55% shooting with 9 boards and 5 assists, followed by Carson Shepard, who had 10 points. Now, I know I was just giving Skylar Cash props, and right now, I might be looking goofy, but he had 8 points, 14 boards, and 6 assists. And similarly, Skylar was in the running for Rookie of the Year, so there is something there. It's just that he didn't take as many shots as he did in Game 1. So, from my perspective, the Bulls definitely seemed to struggle to take the right shots, and on the defensive side, they didn't perform with a plus-minus of -190 compared to 75 in Game 1. So it seemed as if the Bucks showed more discipline this time around, but little did I know at this point that the series was just getting started. Now, back in Chicago, the Bulls fought tooth and nail to take Game 3 by 1 point, beating the Bucks 112 to 111. This time around, there were 2 players who scored over 20, and the team overall was much better with their shooting, making 51% of their shots compared to the Bucks, who made 46% of their shots. This time around, the Bulls didn't rely on a 3-ball as much as they did in Game 2, where they shot 7 for 25. In Game 3, the Bulls actually shot 8 for 16, with 20 of their points coming from the line. So that discipline I mentioned from the Bucks in Game 2 kind of got faded away in this game, but not enough to where they lost by 15 plus. Now, G. Williams finally gave us a game with 25 points and 15 boards, as did Roland Johnson, who had 21 points, 2 assists, and 2 steals. Then we have AJ West and Skylar Cash, who both had double-doubles in addition to G. Williams with 17 points and 12 points respectively, while both were shooting at least 50% from the field, which is a stark difference from Game 2. Then we have Lance Baylor this time around, who was much more efficient with 10 points and 7 assists, while Carson Shepherd maintained the momentum he had in Game 2, with the exception of those 4 turnovers. In fact, a good number of the Bulls had issues with turnovers, including AJ West and Shannon Cage, but ultimately, they pulled through in front of the home crowd. Now, since Game 1, Omar Abdul-Rauf has been steadily playing a more impactful role by leading the team in Game 3 with 23 points and 18 boards on 67% shooting. And Lionel Kellogg finally gave us what I've been looking for from a scoring perspective with 21 points, 12 of which came from beyond the arc. Lionel also had 9 assists and 5 steals on 40% shooting. Now, Lawrence Peters, though, he didn't score as much as he did in Game 2, but he did have a solid 18 with 4 boards and 2 blocks. This was followed by Mike Suarez, who had 12 points, but unfortunately, Mike got injured at this point and would be out for a month. Now, before we move on, I did want to highlight Kirk Miller, who came close to a double-double with 9 points and 9 rebounds on 66% shooting. Right now, Kirk, I'd say he's doing enough to contribute, but I'd like to see him develop further and do more playmaking. Like Geno Ingles on the Hornets, Kirk will be able to develop into a solid role player if he does, in my opinion. But with that being said, this series was now 2-1 with the battle just starting to heat up. Let's dive into Game 4. After seeing this box score, fam, I was high-key salty I didn't pay closer attention to this series at this point in time. The Bucks were able to take Game 4 by 2 points to tie the series up again before going back to Milwaukee. There were some big swings between the first and second quarters, with the Bucks leading by 17 in the first to then be down by 2 going into halftime. The third quarter was a straight defensive battle between the two teams, with both teams scoring under 20 points, and the battle continued on down to the last second of the game. I really wish we could have watched the play-by-play to see what made the difference, or at the very least, who took the last shot. But back at the top again, we have G. Williams with 24 points, 7 boards, 7 assists, 1 steal, and 1 block on 50% shooting. Roland took a back seat this time around, dropping from 21 points down to 6 points and 6 boards. As a result, Lance Baylor clocked in and channeled the energy he had in Game 1, scoring 22 points with 3 boards, 1 assist, and 1 steal. But then there's a 9-point drop in scoring between Lance and Skylar Cash, who had 13 points, 8 boards, 3 assists, 1 steal, and a block. And I ain't gonna hold you, I'm high-key disappointed with AJ's performance, practically the same stat line as Carson Shepherd's, which isn't gonna cut it, especially for him, considering how good he is. But I'm not gonna stretch and be like, oh, that was the cause for the loss, because that wouldn't necessarily be true. I don't know what happened here, fam. I know. Ricky had 26 points in Game 1, but since then, his scoring has been kinda mid. You gotta give me that. Nonetheless, Ricky's efficiency and 22 points definitely helped catapult the Bucks in this win. But when I saw Omar's stat line though, fam, I was shocked. 22 boards is insane. What's crazier is that his season and career high is 27 boards in the game, so naturally, I had to go and check the Bucks records, and he's actually tied with Andrew Bogut, who had 27 boards back in 2011. So Omar is also on the list at the 3 slot for the same record with 25 boards. But for this game specifically, Omar is now 3rd in the Bucks records book for the most rebounds in a playoff game. So in short, Omar did and has been doing his thing, so I can see why he's a bit salty he didn't win Rookie of the Year. Shout out to Kenji Hall. Now getting back to it, Lionel had 18 points with 7 boards and 3 assists. I was very happy and I'm liking this type of consistency from Lionel. Then with Lawrence Peters, his scoring dipped a bit, but he had 12, 5, 4, and 2 on the same efficiency, give or take a basis point. And then we have the same usual suspects or role players, if you want to call them that, with Shane Miles Jr. scoring 8, Kirk Miller also with 8, Ricky Meyer with 6, and Julio Caballero with 6 points. At this point, it was time for the Bucks to head back home for Game 5, so let's dive into it. Back in Milwaukee, the Bucks handled their business to take the lead in the series for the first time after beating the Bulls 118 to 114. All of the stats between the two teams were very similar, ranging from the field goals made, bench points, second chance points, and points in the paint, you name it. However, and the however is in big letters, the Bulls lived by the 3 and died by the 3, shooting 7 for 22 compared to the Bucks, who shot 16 for 46. Now, considering both the teams made 41 shots in total and the Bulls led the free throw game by 5 points, it became very clear as day that the three-pointers is what changed the game. Starting off with the Bucks, Lawrence Peters tapped into the energy he had back in Game 2 to end up with 22 points, with 12 of them coming from beyond the arc on 38% and 36% shooting. Omar had his 4th consecutive double-double with 21 points, 12 of which also came from the three-point line. He also had 15 boards, 2 steals, and 2 blocks on 50% shooting. Then we have Shane Miles Jr., who finally scored over 10 points since games 1 and 2 with 2 boards and 2 assists. Then Lionel Kellogg, he punched in his 4th consecutive double-double with 11 points and 14 assists, but his efficiency left something to be desired. Same could be said about Ricky Meyer, but the big man almost had a double-double with 10 and 7, and then everybody else on the squad contributed with at least 5 points apiece. But did you peep how Ricky Verdue fell from 22 points in Game 4 to 8 points in Game 5? This is what I'm talking about when I say he's inconsistent. In any event, looking at the Bulls box score, G. Williams turned up this game to earn a hard-fought double-double with 34 points and 10 boards on 64% shooting. Lance Baylor scored the second highest again for the second game in a row with 16 points, 5 assists, and 4 steals. But just as in the last game, there's always a big drop in scoring between the players. Last game, it was a drop between Lance Baylor's 22 points and Skylar Cash's 13. In this game, it's a drop from G. Williams' 34 points to Lance's 16. It's a big drop, actually. Roland Johnston, Glenn Baldwin, and Shannon Cage all had better games compared to Game 4 from a points perspective, with Roland getting more involved overall and Glenn scoring more by making more threes and getting to the line this time around. But Shannon's efficiency took a dip this time, shooting 27% compared to 50% in Game 4. Although this player didn't score much, I want to shout out AJ West because he made a Bulls playoff record for the first time with 13 assists to take the 5th slot. Congrats to AJ, and having missed all of this action, I didn't want things to unfold in Game 6 because one of 2 things could have happened. The Bucks could have closed out the series, or the Bulls get the win and take the series to Game 7. So either way, had to dive into it. So let's get into Game 6. Jumping into Game 6 right after the tip-off, the Bulls were still trying to figure out their plan of attack. This play looked like a hot mess and I was wondering what did I get myself into. But maybe that was the point. Confuse the heck out of everybody, get open, and take an easy layup because no one would be guarding the paint. Soon after, Skylar Cash tried to dot Shannon Cage in the paint with a nice no-look pass, but Omar Abdul-Rauf saw it coming and got the steal. After some good ball movement off the fast break, Shane Miles Jr. finished at the rim for 2 points. On the next play, Lawrence Peters was having difficulty staying in front of G. Williams. Goodness gracious. G. Williams created enough space for an open look beyond the arc to bring the lead to 3 points. Roland Johnston was battling with Lionel Kellogg in the post with some wins and some losses. In this highlight, JD Garrett passed the rock to Lionel Kellogg near the post. He tried to back down Roland, but Roland wasn't budging. So instead, Lionel at the post hit a green hook shot over the 7'4" center. Which hook shot was better, Theo Payne's against the 76ers or Lionel's? Let me know down in the comment. But sheesh! Shannon Cage made a crazy play against Lionel to block his shot, and off the fast break, Skylar Cash found G. Williams in the paint for an easy 2 points over JD. A minute later, Lawrence Peters made the same mistake as before and left too much space between himself and G. Williams, which G capitalized on. G hit another deep 3 from the right side to bring the Bulls' lead to 6 points. In this highlight, we get a glimpse of the chemistry between Lionel Kellogg and Omar Abdul-Rauf. Off the fast break, oof! Lionel baits the team and throws the lob to Omar, who catches a mean reverse dunk alley-oop. The Bulls and the Bucks were going back and forth, and this was only the first quarter. Carson Shepard wanted in on the action and felt that Shane Miles Jr. was disrespecting his reign, so naturally he had to pull it. Fortunately, Carson actually made it. Carson has talent, but he's got to do more to be more, you feel me? With under 7 minutes left and a 2-point difference, AJ West threw a bullet to G. Williams, who lost Shane Miles Jr. and pulled a nice moving mid-range jumper. The Bucks were having a hard time containing G, who was feasting the entire quarter. Oof, had Shane on skates. But G wasn't by himself. AJ West was getting busy as well. Here we have AJ sizing up Shane Miles Jr. AJ didn't bother with the pick and roll because he wanted to let Shane know that Shane couldn't guard him. AJ West ended up doing Shane the way Jordan did Byron Russell, to not only break him down but to hit a mid-range as well. Now down by 7, the Bucks needed to be aggressive before the Bulls run got out of hand. Omar shows us what it looks like to be a paint beast, to not only get the boards but to also convert those into second chance points. Off the inbound pass, Glenn Baldwin put the moves on Jose Romero to finish with a tough take at the rim, expanding the lead yet again to 4. Glenn started the season as a 69 overall, and at this point he was a 73, showing flashes of his potential. Fast forward a bit with the Bucks down by 6, the Bulls continued to keep up the fast pace and ball movement. Lance Baylor was wide open on the wing for an MGM or mean green midi. This is why just looking at box scores isn't enough. Every time we watch the Bulls, we could see the talent that just doesn't come across via the stat lines. But look at Kirk Miller being aggressive and hitting the floater over 3 Bulls right here. Oof. If Kirk works on his playmaking, he could become a real problem for defenders in the future. Now on this play, I want you to peep Lance Baylor in the corner at the bottom right with Ricky Perdue guarding him. I don't know if Ricky was looking for butterflies or something, but Lance Baylor caught him slipping to create the space needed for the open shot. Oof. Lance got some big ass feet though, I can't hold you. That's twice now that he ended up with 2 points, which could have easily been 3 if he was mindful about where the line was. On the very next possession, Kirk Miller tried to run the same play as before where he had the floater, but this time he ended up missing. Ricky Meyer got the board but also missed his layup, so Omar took it upon himself to get the second chance points for the team. To make up for his fumble, Ricky Meyer tried some dribble moves and then used his height to get 2 more points on the board before the end of the quarter. To quote Click, "Go ahead, big fella." By the end of the first, the Bucks were down only by 2 points, which isn't bad considering the run the Bulls went on. Now in the second, this game got even more intense for several reasons. First, the Bucks secondary is lacking, and 2, the best scorer they have is Ricky Perdue, which isn't saying much, and then 3, Kirk Miller can score as well, but oftentimes, oh my goodness, that man Lance Baylor lost Ricky Perdue off of that spin move. I cannot get enough of a well-timed spin move. It gets me hyped every time. But as I was saying, Kirk always tries to finish in the paint, which creates a challenge when you have a 7'4" Roland Johnston and 6'8" Lance Baylor protecting the paint when you're 6'2". But look at Ricky Perdue doing what needs to be done to get to the wing and pull the 3 to take the lead at the 10-minute mark. Okay. JD Garrett must have heard me dogging him because he wanted all the smoke, challenging Skylar Cash to not only blow by him, but to also hit a close shot over Roland Johnston to take the lead again. Now with the Bucks gaining steam, Lionel wanted the Rock to finish the fast break, but I guess Shane didn't have the vision. Lionel got the mismatch he wanted at the low post against Skylar Cash, backed him down and hit an easy layup under the basket for a 3-point lead. Fast forward again, Ricky Meyer got a good stop against Roland Johnston, but this time JD found Lionel in the paint for a quick 2 points. Bucks 42, Bulls 37. Soon after, the Bucks were able to get another stop with Lionel getting a steal and then dished the rock to Shane Miles Jr., who finished at the rim and won. G. Williams came back in the game and he did not like what he saw while resting up on the bench. G decided to make an example out of JD by showing him his handling skills and teaching JD that Lance Baylor isn't the only one that has the spin move in his bag, and oof. I know, it's just a spin move you're saying, but I told you, the skill to execute a spin move is dope to me, especially when I'm not expecting it. This hyped Lionel up so much that he attacked Roland immediately and hit him with a green euro. The score is now 47-39. I wouldn't say that this battle between these two was legendary, but it's definitely fun to watch. G didn't let this phase him at all. Like a viper waiting for the right time to attack, as the play developed, he lost Lawrence Peters around Shannon Cage's pick to take a wide open 3, bringing the Bucks lead down to 5 points. And at first I was thinking, why is Roland holding on to the rock? But then it all made sense since everybody thought he was going to do some post work. G was wide open for the shot. But soon after, Shannon ripped Ricky Meyer's pockets and passed the rock to G for a quick tomahawk on the opposite end of the court, bringing the score to within 3. Shannon may not score a lot, but defensively, especially in game, he can guard the best of them. G was still on the attack, especially on fast break, not caring about Lionel being in the paint. G made a weird layup and greened it. Bulls were now only down by 1. After yet another stop and another fast break, AJ West dots G Williams off the right wing, and G proceeds to hit a mean green from 3 to take the lead. Both the defense and the offense were clicking, which put the Bucks on the ropes, and this was only the second quarter. After the Bulls' run, the Bucks got really messy, but unfortunately, Omar is a beast getting boards, which helped drive a lot of the second chance points. At the 2-minute mark, G highlighted his defensive abilities, blocking the snot out of Ricky Perdue. Carson Shepherd got the rock and sprinted full throttle down the court, only to miss the shot. Roland Johnston's tall self was able to get the save and score 2, 49-55. The Bucks gave up a wild lead and now had to deal with a 6-point deficit. They needed to get some points on the board and to stop the Bulls' run before the half, and here Roland made an error, giving Lionel the space he needed for the MGM, which Lionel took full advantage of. With close to a minute left in the quarter, the battle between Roland and Lionel continued. This time, Roland won the contest by getting the board and the putback over Lionel. And at the half, the Bucks were down by 5, losing in every category, including the comparison of the top performers, with Lionel having 16 points, 5 boards, and 3 assists, while G had 26 points, 4 boards, and 2 assists. Jumping into the fourth with the Bucks down by 13 and struggling to gain the momentum we saw in the second, the Bucks were trying to slow down the pace of the Bulls and move the ball better, but some Bucks team members were still struggling to hit their shots. So Omar Abdul-Rauf had to get things done in the paint, but even still, the Bucks were persistent in trying to find their rhythm. Off the fast break, Omar found Ricky Perdue, who got a green 3-ball to drop from the right wing. Now, despite how inconsistent Ricky may be, he earned the little flex even though they were still down by 10. But on the next play after this, Ricky had some trouble guarding Rocky Chambers and ended up giving those points back to the Bulls after fouling Rocky Chambers as he drove to the rim and won. A few moments later, we finally got a glimpse of Kirk Miller's playmaking abilities as he found Omar driving past Rocky Chambers for a safe 2-handed dunk at the rim. Now, if you're like me, I always like the underdog story, and Glenn Baldwin might be that. He had Shane Miles Jr. looking sus on the court after hitting another mid-range shot off of the pick from Shannon Cage. But Ricky Perdue was now in his bag. After Omar set a sturdy pick, Ricky P got to the perimeter to hit a slightly contested shot. The Bucks were now down by 8, and it's crazy how quickly G recovered to contest Ricky Perdue's shot. But nonetheless, back on the other end, Glenn Baldwin was at it again. As he waited for the play to develop, Shannon got in place, setting the pick he needed. Glenn made his move towards the line and shot another mid-range shot, making Shane look goofy again. This put the battery in Lionel's bag, and he hit Shannon with the twing and jet past him to hit a contested lay at the rim. Finally, with the momentum on their side, the Bucks were back to being aggressive, which led to messier shots, but folks like Lionel and Omar got the boards and scored the needed second chance points. This aggressiveness could be seen on defense with this great contest by Ricky Perdue. This led to a quick 2 points at the opposite end of the court by Lionel in the paint. Bucks were down by 4. Carson Shepherd gave us a glimpse as to why he was the second overall pick during this game, breaking down JD off the dribble to finish at the rim. But JD paid Carson back in kind not too long after, cutting towards the basket to finish at the rim as well. I just wish this battle had way more highlights. The Bulls were still up by 4 with a lot of time left on the clock, but G wasn't focused on the clock at all. He was focused on making each play count and juked the mess out of Ricky Perdue to hit a mean green from 3. Oof. Now here we have one of my favorite plays of the game, mainly because it's a continuation of Lionel's battle with Roland. Lionel got the steal, drove past Roland, and finished at the rim with a tough lay over the 7-footer. But G Williams couldn't care less. Running the same play, he buried another mean green from 3. Sheesh! With the score now 107-111 and Skylar Cash at point, Skylar hit G right in the pocket under the rim with G scoring easily. After G hit those back-to-back threes, it felt as if the check engine light came on for the Bucks, and the momentum they had was gone. Sheesh! Even the big man was hitting MGMs, which the Bucks weren't prepared for. With 6 minutes left in the game, the Bucks needed to adjust and to do it quickly. Omar was gassed at this point, but was doing whatever he could to keep the game within reach. Some might argue he was doing too much. On this play, Omar saw that Lawrence Peters wasn't guarding G Williams well at all during the game. He tried to help out but got burned by leaving Shannon Cage open in the paint, who quickly scored. Lionel was gassed at this point as well, but he was still in attack mode and caught Roland sleeping around the perimeter to finish at the rim. Roland wasn't ready for Lionel's first step out the post. That split second helped Lionel bring the Bucks to within 3 points. But fam, JD Garrett was definitely a liability on defense. He couldn't guard Skylar Cash, Carson Shepard, nor G. Williams. This put a lot of pressure on the Bucks to continue scoring quickly with the hope of getting a stop on defense to tie the game. But as I said before, G. Williams couldn't care less. He was in straight beast mode. He lost 3 bucks at the elbow to finish at the rim with ease. Oof, goodness. Omar tried his best against literally anyone who came into the paint. Right here, Omar heavily contested Roland Johnston and stopped him from scoring twice, but the team failed to convert those stops into points. Now down by 7, Omar's MO was to score and to do it quickly. So the coach ran the same play as before that resulted in Omar scoring from underneath the rim. But the Bucks suffered from poor transitions when it came to the fast break, which the Bulls exploited. Roland Johnston was out here thinking he was Shaq with that dunk. Goodness. On the very next play, Omar taught us that he doesn't always need the dunk, and that he has some finesse when it comes to scoring with a tough make. The back and forth attacks continued nonstop until the final buzzer, and with under 2 minutes left, Roland continued to exploit the Bucks' poor transition. As did AJ West following G. Williams' contest of Lawrence Peters' layup, which you can see right here. AJ got the rebound and passed the rock to Skylar Cash, who set up the playoff for the fast break. AJ then slashed towards the rim and drew a foul while laying up the ball and won. Lawrence now had his 5th personal with 1 minute and 25 seconds left. Down by 10, this was when Lawrence decided to step up and hit a deep 3-point shot. But it was too little too late. The Bulls take Game 6 to keep their playoff run alive, beating the Bucks by 13. I don't know about you, but I thoroughly enjoyed this game. Let me know what you think down in the comments. As we saw, G. Williams was the driving force behind the Bulls' win, hands down. He almost tallied a triple-double with 46 points, 10 boards, 9 assists, and 2 blocks on 69% shooting. On top of that, G. Williams also earned much props, having made the Bulls record book to tie Scottie Pippen for the 2nd most 3-pointers made in a playoff game. And on top of that, G also made the regular season record as the number 5 Bull player with the most 3-pointers made in the game, which was at 8 shots made. From there, we see a 28-point drop-off between Skylar and G. Skylar had a solid stat line with 18, 4, and 7 off of 57% shooting, although he did get into foul trouble. After Skylar, we have 3 Bulls who had double-doubles off of great shooting splits. First, we had AJ West, who had 17 points, 10 boards, and 4 assists on 70% shooting. Roland Johnston, he had 14, 14, 9, and 3, shooting 7 for 12, but he got his pockets ripped 4 times. Then we have Shannon Cage, who had 12 points, 11 boards, and that crazy block on Lionel Kellogg on 63% shooting. Now Lance Baylor, he didn't score a lot of points, but he definitely stopped the Bucks' momentum on 2 occasions. The same could be said for Rocky Chambers, who was perfect shooting from the field. Then we have Glenn Baldwin and Carson Shepard, who still need to work on their efficiency, but their 15 points definitely contributed to this win. Ultimately, this was a fantastic game by the Bulls to keep their playoff run alive. We finally got a great game from both Lionel Kellogg and Omar Abdul-Rauf, both scoring over 30 points. Lionel had 36 with 8 boards, 5 assists, and 2 steals on 59% shooting. It's just too bad he didn't make any of his threes. Lionel did make the Bucks record book for this game with 17 field goals made in a playoff game to take 5th place after Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Omar Abdul-Rauf had 31 points with 18 boards, 1 assist, 2 steals, and a block on 75% shooting, most of which came from the paint. Then we have a 13-point drop-off to Ricky Perdue, who had 18 points, but had an abysmal 4 for 13. JD had some discipline in this game, scoring 11 points and getting 9 assists on 50% shooting, although the majority of his points came from the line. Similarly, although Lawrence had 10, 5, and 4, he shot an atrocious 22% from the field and had 5 fouls. Ricky Myers did his thing, and I'm hoping he develops into a paint beast. He had 10 with 6 boards, 1 steal, and 1 block. Shane Miles Jr. wasn't involved much during the game, but he contributed, although I know he can do more. But Kirk let me down, only shooting 17% from the field with 2 points out of 13 minutes, which was that floater that we saw. Kirk pretty much refuted my commentary from before, but there's still room for growth, or at least I hope. Nonetheless, with this loss, the Bucks would need to do much better in Milwaukee because at this point it was do or die. Now, I had to simcast Game 7 rather than simulate it because I knew that if the game was close in the last 2 minutes, we'd have to hop in for the action. But starting off in the first quarter, the Bulls took an early lead which the Bucks would eventually overcome at the 4-minute mark to take the quarter by 5 points. In the second, after 5 minutes of back and forth action, the Bulls were able to pull away with a 20-4 run, taking an 11-point lead. By the half, the Bucks were only down by 8 points. At the start of the third, the Bucks went on a 7-0 run to bring the game to within 1 point, but the Bulls fought back to keep the slight edge they had over the Bucks. The Bucks were finally able to take back the lead at the 2-minute mark, but in the last minute of the third, the Bulls were able to take back the lead, and crazy enough, with 1 second left, the Bucks bounced back to take a 2-point lead to end the quarter. Now in the fourth, I was ready for us to hop in to watch the end of this game and this great series. After 4 lead changes, the game stalled for 2 minutes with neither the Bulls nor the Bucks scoring a point. And at around the 4:30 mark, the Bulls took the lead, followed by 2 subsequent lead changes. I thought this was it. We were going to get to watch a great closeout to the series, but with under 3 minutes left in the game, the Bucks were down an astonishing 9 points after the Bulls went on a 12-4 run. I debated as to whether or not I should hop in, and I let the sim run a little bit just to give me an inclination as to whether or not it would be worth it, but I was sadly disappointed. The Bulls went on to expand this run 21-14 to win Game 7 and eliminate the Bucks 105-97. This was still a great series, don't get me wrong, but I was just sad to see the Bucks go out like that. I was hoping for like a 1 to 3 point game. And looking at what transpired towards the end of the game, the Bucks were missing free throws and dunks, whereas the Bulls were hitting shots from all 3 levels. In fact, the Bulls hit 5 consecutive 3-point shots in the last 3 minutes of the game, just abusing the Bucks from the perimeter. Talk about a team folding under pressure. That's tough, man. The first thing I noticed about the Bucks scoring is that there was way better distribution in scoring. But Lionel Kellogg disappeared this game, having only 9 points on 40% shooting. Sure, he did have 7 boards, 9 assists, and 3 steals, but he also had 5 turnovers. Going back to the top, Lawrence Peters had 17 points on 35% shooting from the field and 14% shooting from beyond the arc. Omar's scoring dropped significantly from Game 6 to 16 points, 17 boards, 3 assists, 4 steals, and 2 blocks on 29% shooting. Jeez. Kirk Miller stepped up a bit in the closeout game with 14 and 6 on 50% shooting. Ricky Perdue, he was still terrible when it comes to his efficiency, although he had 12 points, and Shane Miles Jr. had pretty much the same game as in Game 6, but with less minutes. It was tough to see Omar and Lionel go out like this, but this is Omar's rookie year and Lionel's 3rd year in the league, so barring any injuries, we should expect to see more of these two in the coming seasons. As for the Bulls, AJ West and G. Williams absolutely torched the Bucks. AJ had 26 points, 5 boards, 6 assists, 2 steals, and a block on 63% shooting from the field, as well as 55% shooting from beyond the arc. On top of this, AJ West joined G. Williams in the Bulls record books for the most 3-pointers made in a playoff game with a total of 6, which tied Ben Gordon's record. And speaking of G, he had a 23-point double-double with 14 boards, 7 assists on 69% shooting, but he didn't protect the ball very well with 4 turnovers. Mind you, there were others worse, way worse than him on the team. Now, the 7'4" Roland Johnson continued with almost the same energy from Game 6, scoring 15 points, but he barely got any boards or blocks. Carson Shepherd not only scored more this time around with 11 points, but he also did it with better efficiency, so kudos to him. Now, looking at Lance Baylor, he had a crazy stat line on worse shooting. 5 steals is a crazy number, but he didn't come close to earning a spot in the record books, unfortunately. But this goes to show you how the Bulls were able to shut down the Bucks. Not only were they efficient with their scoring, but they were also clamping the Bucks up, shutting them down, getting steals. And I will say it will be interesting to see how the Bulls fare against the winner of our next series, which will be the Toronto Raptors versus the Orlando Magic. Full disclosure, I didn't pay much attention to this series, but I low-key wish that I did, mainly because Game 1 was sort of a close one with the Magic beating the Raptors by 7 points. It seemed as if the Raptors' game plan started to fall apart in the 3rd quarter and completely collapsed in the 4th. JJ Wesley got injured in the last game of the regular season against the Magic, which may have played a huge factor since he was predominantly a force on the interior, but JJ would be out for 4 to 6 weeks with an ankle sprain, so Diego Fernandez had to fill in. Now, the game was fairly even between the two teams, but the Raptors committed 27 fouls compared to the 17 for the Magic, which then allowed the Magic to score 13 more points from the free throw line. So ultimately, this game could have gone either way, but let's take a look at the box score starting with the Magic. EJ Flores really impressed me this season, especially how he led the team while Darren Harper was out with an injury. He continued to impress with how he opened the series with a 27-point and 13-assist double-double, so a center with both playmaking and defensive abilities is a real problem to contend with, especially one that is also somewhat efficient with shooting and has the ability to get to the line often. So it was hard for me to find a current NBA player that is similar, but the closest I could come to is a hybrid of Joel Embiid and the Joker, but don't quote me on that. Now, Darren Harper, he also had a double-double on 47% shooting with 26 points, 14 boards, and 5 assists, but there was a big drop in points between him and the six-man Kieran Doyle, who scored the third most on the team with 15 points. Then we have Irvin Best, who surprised me with this 13-point game, which was well above his 8 points on the season and 9 against the Raptors. Fun fact, Irvin went undrafted and started the season as a 69 overall, which we've seen a few times over the course of the season thus far, but he was able to get some playtime over 39 games and progress to a 73 overall and earn the minutes that he got in this playoff round. Alex Lewis had a typical 11-point game with 7 assists, but he exceeded his average turnovers per game, which is not a good look. And then after Alex, I've wanted to note the other rookies Spencer Ryan and Ruben Hernandez, who were both able to contribute with 8 points on decent shooting. Spencer was the 14th overall pick this season, and Ruben came from the G League, but both contributed in their own way and progressed 3 overalls over the season from a 73 and 70 respectively. Looking at the Raptors detail, there was good distribution in the Raptors scoring, but Logan Wolf got absolutely clamped up by Darren Harper because there was no way Elias Larson would be guarding Logan, like none at all. Check out episode 1 and 7 for highlights on Logan Wolf, as well as his creation vid, which can be found in the FBL creation playlist down below. Now getting back to it, in this game, Logan only had 7 points and shot 3 for 9 when he averaged 26 points on 10 for 18 against the Magic during the regular season. That's tough. Yes, Logan had 15 assists, which was the most assists in Raptors history, playoff history to be specific, but what good is that if the team loses? Now, I'll quickly note that Logan is also tied for first with Jose Calderon and has the 5th most assists in a regular season game. So after Logan, with JJ Wesley out and Logan getting clamped up, it seemed that Jaden Barlow had to answer the call with 25 points, 5 boards, and 4 assists. Wes Wallace, who gave the Pelicans problems back in episode 1, he shot 50% from the field with 15 points, 6 boards, 6 assists, and 3 steals, followed by Malcolm Carmichael, who scored 15 points and had 6 boards on 6 for 12 shooting. Then we have Guy Blackwell, who had 14, 3, 1, and 2, Ross Gibson, who had 11, 5, and 5, Rick Warren, who had 11, 1, and 1, and Franklin Lee, who had 10, 6, 1, and 2. So basically everybody in the rotation was able to score, but Logan's lackluster scoring and Diego's horrendous shooting definitely contributed to the Raptors' loss. Now, if you thought Game 1 was bad, fam, Game 2 was worse with the Magic winning by 40 points. The Raptors not only got spanked in the third like in Game 1, but also in the second where the Magic scored 41 to the Raptors' 25. Yet oddly enough, the difference between the bench scoring of the two teams was 1 point, so to me, this meant that the starters were getting washed up and down the court. The Raptors only made 6 out of 19 threes compared to the Magic, who made 16 out of 29. On top of that, there was a big difference in points from free throws, with the Magic scoring 29 from the line compared to the Raptors, who only scored 11. But yo, do you see the first line? This man Alex Lewis had 40 points. After doing some digging, first and foremost, Wes Wallace got injured during the game and he would be out for 2 to 3 weeks, which meant that coach, and by coach I mean the Raptors coach, he ended up putting in the 61 overall Luke Duncan in at the 1. Now you already know, with the 61 overall off G, you're asking for trouble. Thus, the man who averaged 13 points on 46% shooting during the regular season, and more specifically 16 and 46 against the Raptors, he got to feast out there and exploit the mismatch. Coach could have put Percy Zerbo, who has the same level of playmaking as Luke Duncan, but who has way better perimeter defense, with the 52 overall versus Luke's 28 overall for the attribute perspective. And yes, Alex was in foul trouble. Yes, he had 4 turnovers, but to shoot 84, 67, and 80% is effing wild. In addition to this, Darren Harper also feasted out there, carrying the team with a triple-double with 37 points, 18 boards, 9 assists, 2 steals, and a block, shooting 10 for 16 and 6 for 7 from beyond the arc. Those 18 points from the arc were crazy. Darren Harper tied the Magic record for second most 3-pointers made in a playoff game. He also tied T-Mac with the 3rd most points in a regular season game, as well as Jason Richardson, Nick Anderson, and Dennis Scott for the 2nd most 3-pointers made in a regular season game with 9 3-pointers. I was also surprised to learn that Darren tied Nikola Vucevic's 29 boards in a regular season game 3 times and also had the 5th highest of 28. Darren has been beasting this season, and I caught myself lacking for not being more in tune. Now after Darren, EJ Flores recorded his second double-double in the series alongside Darren with 24 points and 12 assists, but geez, he had 7 turnovers and 4 fouls. I'm gonna need him to have more discipline. Irvin Best came in with the 4th most points again at 11 with 50% shooting, followed by Ruben Hernandez, who came close to a double-double with 10 points and 9 boards on 3 for 7 shooting. The Raptors would need to change something major to get back in this series. Now this is the Logan Wolf that I love to watch but hate to play against. He had a 30-point double-double with 12 assists and 4 steals, but he also had 4 turnovers and 4 fouls. Those 4 steals helped Logan make the Raptors record book again, tying Kyle Lowry and Kawhi Leonard for the second most steals in a playoff game. Now Jaden Barlow, he continued the momentum from Game 1 with 29 points and 6 boards on 11 for 21 shooting. Then there's a big drop in points between Jaden and Malcolm Carmichael, who had 10 points and 5 boards. Everyone else either didn't turn up or didn't show up. So for example, Guy Blackwell during the regular season averaged 11 points on 26 minutes a game, and yet in Game 2, he had 40 minutes and only got 2 points from the line. So as a result, the Raptors were down bad, losing both games in Orlando, and they would need to take both home games to keep the series alive. But the Magic's momentum continued as they took Game 3 in Toronto by 15 points. It seemed as if the Raptors made the necessary adjustments with better efficiency, though they had lower volume in shooting from the line and beyond the arc. But the difference would more likely be at the individual level, and the box scores confirmed just that. Logan had a monster 45-point game with 7 boards, 9 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks on 15 out of 31 shooting, but he continued to struggle with the turnovers. However, this game did place Logan in the Raptors' playoff record book again as now the second highest in points scored in the playoff game. Logan is also 3rd for the most free throws in a playoff game with the 13 he scored during this one. So after Logan, there's a 26-point difference between him and Rick Warren, who had 19 points, 4 boards, and 2 assists on 89% shooting. Jaden Barlow had 14 points on 5 for 13 shooting, but then everyone else had single-digit points, which simply wasn't going to cut it up against the Magic. Not saying that Luke Duncan made a big difference, but him fouling out probably added pressure onto Logan to do more with less playmaking from his teammates. EJ Flores was back on top before the Magic with 36 points, but he was just shy of recording his 3rd consecutive double-double with only, and I say this lightly, 9 assists. Elias Larson had a breakout game of 21 points, 4 boards, and 3 assists, but surprisingly, Darren Harper struggled from the field, only shooting for 25%. He was able to get 6 points from the line, which helped him achieve his 3rd consecutive double-double in the playoffs, but this was an abnormal game to say the least. Fun fact, out of the 69 games that Darren played during the regular season, 67 of them were double-doubles. It's practically second nature for him at this point. Alex Lewis finally came back to earth in this game, only scoring 14 points, while Kieran Doyle had a much better game this time around with 11 points and 50% shooting compared to Game 2. Now I gotta give props to Irvin Best. He was very consistent over the past 3 games, although his scoring gradually declined. But still, Irvin made his contributions felt, finishing with 3 consecutive double-digit point games. Now, if Ruben were able to increase his shots while keeping the same efficiency and boards, Ruben can become a more well-rounded player. Definitely looking forward to seeing how Ruben develops over the course of these series, and by series I mean like the FBL series, not the playoff games. Now, the Raptors now had to do the impossible in order to keep their playoff run alive, but this would be very difficult for them to do. I wholeheartedly expected this to be a sweep, but the Raptors were able to rally and win Game 4 by 4 points. Now, isn't it strange that Logan's low-scoring games are when his teammates really shine? 8 out of the 9-man rotation had double-digit points, which probably threw off the Magic's defense. At the top of the pack, Jaden Barlow had a 25-point and 10-rebound double-double with 6 assists and 2 steals. Ross Gibson went from 3 points in Game 3 to 18 points in Game 4 on 78% shooting, which is absolutely wild. Then we have Guy Blackwell, who also had his best game in the series with 15 points, 5 boards, 2 assists, shooting 71% from the field. He also shot 67% from the arc, hitting 4 shots from a 3-point land. If Guy becomes more consistent, the 20th overall pick could eventually become a real threat offensively. Guy is currently the 3rd on the Raptors' most 3-pointers made list with 9 in a regular season game, but he is very inconsistent, as you can see how things differed between games 2 and 3. Luke Duncan's stat line is pretty wild with 14 points, but the man only hit 1 shot out of 6 and made 12 out of 13 free throws. Malcolm had a better game with 14 points, as did Franklin Lee with 11 points, 6 boards, and 4 assists. Then we have Rick Warren, who is in his bag with 11 points on perfect shooting. Talk about changing the game. Looking at the Magic's box score, 3 players had double-doubles. So starting off with Darren Harper, he led the way with 27 points and 17 boards, making this his 4th consecutive double-double game in the series. But it seemed as if he, Alex Lewis, and Elias Larson were in foul trouble, with many others on the team tacking on at least 2 fouls, which makes defending more difficult. EJ Flores achieved his 3rd double-double of the series with 25 points and 14 boards on 47% shooting, but EJ's 14 assists tied for the 2nd most assists in a playoff game for the Magic, tying Hedo Turkoglu and Penny Hardaway, so shout out to him. He also tied Scott Skiles for the 2nd most assists in the regular season game with 21 assists, so kudos to him as well for that one. Then we have Ruben Hernandez, who had a solid 17 points on 6 for 7 shooting with 10 boards, followed by Alex Lewis, who had 14, Kieran Doyle, who had 12, and Emmanuel Libisier, who had 10 points. Now, the Magic had 45 shots compared to the Raptors' 43, and the Raptors only had 1 more 3-pointer compared to the Magic. The real difference was the Raptors getting 26 points from the line compared to the Magic's 19, although both teams committed the same number of fouls. This would still be an uphill battle for the Raptors to come back from, now being down 3-1. If they were to win Game 5, the Raptors' chances could potentially improve. But the Magic was not having that, beating the Raptors 121-111 in overtime. The Raptors dominated the first half and the 3rd quarter, only to fumble the bag not only in the 4th but also in OT, getting mopped by 10 points. The Raptors got hit with a barrage of threes from the Magic, who hit 16 out of 40 compared to the Raptors, who hit 9 out of 27. In addition to this, the Raptors committed 21 fouls compared to the Magic, who committed 13 fouls. This resulted in the Magic making 25 out of 27 shots from the line, whereas the Raptors only made 4 out of 4. EJ was feasting during this game, hitting 6 threes to tie the record for the 2nd most 3-pointers made in Magic playoff history. What's dope about it is that EJ tied the record set by his teammate Darren Harper, as well as Nikola Vucevic and Rashard Lewis. EJ also came close to doing the same during the regular season with 8 threes, but 4 people on the list have 9. Now, although he didn't have a double-double, EJ had 38 points and 9 assists on 70% shooting and 55% from beyond the arc. Now, Darren, he completed Game 5 with his 5th consecutive double-double with 28 points, 20 boards, 4 assists, 1 block, and 3 steals, but Darren really needs to work on protecting the ball. Alex Lewis booked his 5th double-double point game with terrible shooting split, but he got to the line a lot, and surprisingly enough, Alex actually tied for the 4th most steals in Magic playoff history with his 4 steals. Then the Magic had 3 other players that scored 12 points, and Elias Larson, Kieran Doyle, and Emmanuel Libisier. Elias could definitely work on his efficiency though, but right now his contributions outweighed his mistakes. Ruben didn't score as much, but his 11 boards absolutely helped the team get back into the game and to take the win. Solid game overall from the Magic. Now, as for the Raptors, you can see what I'm saying. The minute Logan has a great game, it's as if the team takes a back seat. Logan made the Raptors record book again with a 42-point game to become the 4th highest in points scored during a playoff game. So now, he has the 2nd and 4th most points, but he also tied Vince Carter's record for the most field goals made with 19 for the top spot. And during the regular season, Logan tied for the most field goals made with 20 and also has the 4th and 5th most field goals made in Raptors history at 19 and 18 respectively. On top of this, Logan also broke his own record that he set in Game 1 with 17 assists in a playoff game, but as I said before, what good is breaking all of these records if you're not winning the game? After Logan, the 2nd highest scorer was Jaden Barlow, who had 16 points. Jaden also suffered with turning over the ball, doing so 4 times, but he had 7 boards, 4 assists, and 3 steals. This would be Jaden's 5th consecutive game with double-digit points. Following Jaden, we have Franklin Lee, who had 14 points, 9 boards, 3 assists, 1 steal, and 4 blocks on 50% shooting, which was by far his best game of the season. Malcolm Carmichael maintained the production from Game 4 to score 13 points, but get 2 blocks and shoot 6 for 14. But like Logan and Jaden, Malcolm had issues protecting the ball, so I would say that everybody on the Raptors team contributed, but they just didn't have the discipline to push through to take their run even further. After completing the gentleman's sweep, the Magic will go on to face the Chicago Bulls in the next round, which should be an interesting series. And that will do it for this video, fam. Thank you for your patience while waiting for this episode to drop. I know it has been a long time since the last video dropped. As I mentioned before, my schedule is a bit hectic and I'm still trying to figure out the schedule, and this video was a bit ambitious compared to what I thought I'd be able to do in a short amount of time. But nonetheless, thank you for watching this episode all the way through. This in total was 9 hours of footage, and I tried to add some screens to add some context to some of the analyses that I provided. Hopefully you found it worth it. If you made it this far, do me a solid and let me know which series you'd like for me to highlight in the next episode down in the comments below, or using the poll that I have set up in the community tab. Don't forget to check out the links in the description if you're looking to catch up on the FBL or to show some love to my favorite content creators. Everything's listed below. As always, I enjoy playing the game and making these videos. I hope you enjoyed the video as well. Until the next episode, fam, keep grinding, keep growing, and keep shining. I'll check you later.